right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday morning, or rather Saturday morning, excuse me, I'm already out of sorts. And welcome to another morning live stream. It's going to be a super chilled stream today. We're going to be doing some patching in VCV Rack 2 on the desktop. Now, this is a free software, and we're going to take a quick listen here. Actually, what we've been rather listening to is a patch that I put together a few days ago. This patch actually took me 3 days to put together. This is my first really large and robust patch in VCV Rack 2 on the desktop. Mic is just a little low. Okay, thanks, Brian. Alright, hopefully that's going to be a little bit better. Please let me know as the stream continues because I can adjust the mic or the music accordingly. And thanks for everyone who's hanging out today. Alright, let's see here. Alright, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at VCV Rack 2 on the desktop, and this is where my rack comes from. For those of you who are familiar with my rack content, my rack is an iPad offshoot of VCV Rack on the desktop here. Now, what's really awesome about VCV Rack is there's a whole lot more modules available to us to play with than in my rack. And there's also a 100% free version of this software, VCV Rack 2, and that's what we're using today. We're using the free version of VCV Rack 2. Okay, now I want to show you guys sort of how I got into using this again, as opposed to, working with my rack or working with hardware. I have teamed up with Nano Modules to show their Kaisha, let me change the camera here, to show their Kaisha eurorack case, and I've made a few videos on this case over the last few months. And I've recently acquired actually a whole bunch of their modules, and I've been exploring using their modules in the case. I've got a whole bunch of their ONA. I've got a whole bunch. I've got 3 of their ONA oscillators. I've got 2 of their font filters. I've got the chord envelope generator. I've got the alt amplitude module, excuse me, and then I've also got the MAR mixer module, and I've been having a really great time exploring these modules. These are really fantastic modules from Nano Modules, and while doing some research online, I found that these modules are actually all available free in VCV Rack 2 on the desktop. So I thought, let me go ahead and take a break from playing with the hardware and let me, get into VCV Rack 2 and see what's going on here. So I've got it installed. And the difference, one of the main differences between VCV Rack and my rack on the iPad, let me get a sip of water, is that on this desktop version here on VCV Rack, actually let me clarify just one thing, and that is the my rack developer is not the same developer as VCV Rack. So these are 2 different entities per se. So on the desktop, there's actually 2,500 plus modules that we can download and install. Some of these are free modules, most of them are free modules, and some of these are paid modules. Now, it's really easy to add more modules to our library, and why I'm discussing this right at the beginning is that when you download VCV Rack, it doesn't come with all of the modules that we're going to be using today pre-installed and ready to go. You need to sort of browse their library and decide what modules you want to install. Let me see if I can catch my breath here, and we'll keep going. So I just want to show you how to manage the modules once you've got the software installed on your desktop. Now, this works on Mac as well as PC. Today, we're on my Mac. But all we need to do if we want to add a module here is we just sort of right click on the background, get rid of these filters here, and it'll bring up a listing of all of the modules that we currently have installed, okay? Um, Now we can sort this by different things. We can sort this by, like, say I need a clock generator. Well, we can, look for a clock generator, or say I need, a filter per se. I can, scroll and then just browse through all of my available filters. Um, and then let's say, you need a filter and you don't have, the type of filter that you need installed, for example. All we need to do is over here on the upper left where it says library. All we need to do is click on library, and then we just go browse VCV library. And when we click on that, it's going to bring open their library on the internet. So you'll need to be connected to the internet for this. And here we can search by, a name if you know a name you're searching for. We can search for a brand, of who's putting out the modules, if you know who makes the module or modules you're looking for. There are, plenty of modules from real world manufacturers here like Bifaco and Erica Synths, and of course Nano Modules, which we're going to get into. So let's say like when I was installing the Nano Modules, I needed to go to the library and I needed to look for Nano Modules, and then here we can get, showing of all of the modules that are available. And we can, if it doesn't say, remove, it would typically just, I'm trying to point like it's the iPad. I'm so used to teaching a different way than on the desktop, so forgive me if I talk a lot with my hands today. But so here we would just add, the modules that we want. We would handpick whatever we want here. We could scroll through different brands, add more modules, whatever. And then once you've done that and you've, clicked these add buttons and you've got the modules in that you want to be working with, we just go back here to VCV Rack. We go back to that library tab at the top. And when we click that, now that we've, browsed the library, it's going to kind of cross-reference your desktop version with what you've just tried to add. It's going to allow you to, click a few install buttons there and get those modules into your VCV Rack library. Then all we need to do is just exit the software and restart the software, and any modules you've just downloaded will now be available inside of VCV Rack. All right. Let's see here. If anybody has any questions along the way today, please feel free to drop those in the chat and I'll do my best to answer those. We're going to go ahead and get started completely from scratch today, and we're going to try to put together, a little bit of like a chilled kind of a dubby techno type of groove. If you've been following my channel at all, you pretty much know that dubby techno type of sound that I really like. We're going to put something together like that today from complete scratch. I've got a couple of ideas for some modules to mess with here, and some ways to create some interesting, hopefully, musical results. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File and we're going to go to New. It says, this current patch is unsaved, but it's definitely saved, so I don't need to worry about that. It brings up their default patch, which I'm just going to use. I'm going to keep this audio out rather, and I'm going to grab everything else by just highlighting it with the mouse and hitting the delete button. So all I've got right now is just this audio module, which is going to connect to the audio interface that is connected to my Mac, and that's the first thing that we need to do so we can hear any audio coming out of VCV Rack. So I'm going to go ahead and click where it says no device, and I'm going to select my device. Now I have a sound card connected to the Mac that has like 8 inputs and 8 outputs, but we're not going to worry about like using it in a fancy multiple input or multiple output type of way today. We're just going to do 1 to 2 in and 1 and 2 out, okay? So I've just selected my audio interface here on this, on this module. Let me see if I can zoom in and show you guys that a little tiny bit better, right? Just select your audio interface over here, and now we're, able to send audio right out to whatever you're listening with, whether you're listening with headphones or monitor speakers or whatever. What I want to do is I want to try to create, the first thing we're going to try to do is create like a nice chord pad drone texture soundscape type of thing with lots of evolution and modulation in the sound. And then what we're going to do is, being a sample based workflow kind of guy, is we're going to record that and we're going to use that as some different samples. Hopefully, that's the idea anyway, to create some neat chord stabs that we can run through lots of delay and reverb and get kind of like a dubby thing happening. So, what I need to do first is I need to insert some modules so we can go ahead and start creating this chord pad. We're going to go ahead and create, not create rather, but we're going to go ahead and load in a mixer first off so that I can start routing audio. And what we're going to do is I always like to insert a limiter before the last mixer and the audio output. This is going to help protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers. I definitely recommend putting a limiter as the very last thing in your chain before you send the audio out to the audio interface. All right. So I've got a Mix 8 from Bog Audio here. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go tags. We're going to choose limiter and I'm going to grab this limiter from Bog Audio. Now we're going to scoot everything over here, and actually I'm going to go ahead and put an EQ in first, and I want a stereo EQ, and I know that Bog Audio makes one of those. Let me see if I can zoom in just a tiny bit more so you guys can see a little bit better as well. Cool. Can you guys see that? Okay. Hey, what's happening? We got Rabbit Bat in the chat. We got Void 101 in the chat. Can you guys hear me okay so far? Thanks for tuning in and hanging out, guys. I think this is going to be a pretty long stream today. So if you guys want to maybe grab a cup of coffee, this would probably be a really good time for that. Um, I'm going to try to go slow and sort of explain everything that I'm doing every step of the way. So again, just let me know if you've got questions. I'm going to go ahead and right click and I'm going to select equalizer in the tags so I can see all of the equalizers that I've got installed currently in VCV Rack. I'm going to choose this stereo equalizer from Bog Audio. It's an EQS, it's called, S for stereo. I'm just going to move all these modules together here, and then we're going to start patching this out. I'm going to grab the left output of the mixer and route that into the left input of the EQ. Same with the right. I'm going to grab the left output of the EQ and route that into the input of the limiter. I'm going to grab the right and put that into the right input of that limiter. And then we're just going to now route this limiter. We're going to route this over to the actual audio interface. So now anything I run into this mixer is going to go right over to our audio interface. What I know right off the jump is that what I'm going to try to create first is going to be kind of this chord pad texture type of thing. And I know I want to pull a little bit of the low frequency content out of this sound to make sure that I have room for the bass line that we're going to pin down underneath this sound later. So right off the jump, I'm going to use this EQ that I've put in and I'm going to pull out some of the low frequencies on that. I'm going to bring that down to maybe like -10 on the low frequencies just by default because I already know like what the use case is for what we're about to create. Now what I need to do is I just need to go back into the menu and grab a whole bunch of modules from Nano Modules so we can create a chord pad and start getting some sound together here. I'm going to go, let's see here, we can sort by brand. So I'm going to go, whoops, I want to actually reset the filters so it's not tagged on just an equalizer. And now I want to go to brand and I want to go to Nano Modules. Here it shows me all of their modules that I've currently got installed, which is actually all of their modules. We're going to grab the MAR mixer. We're going to put that in. We're going to grab their font filter. We're going to put that in. And we're also going to grab ONA, which is an oscillator, and we're going to put that in. If you just touch a module and hit Command D on your keyboard, you can duplicate that module. If you touch a module and hit delete on your keyboard, you can get rid of it. So I needed to make some duplicates of this ONA oscillator. I just touch it and hit Command D twice to make those duplicates. I'm going to put the mixer on this side and the filter on that side. I'm going to bring these oscillators a little bit more over. There really isn't any rhyme or reason to how I'm organizing this right now. I'm just trying to make it a little bit more easy to understand the screen flow. I actually want one more ONA oscillator for a total of 4. So I'm going to just click on that, and I'm going to Command D rather again to get another one of those. Now, let's see here. We're going to put the filter after the mixer, I guess. And what I want to do is there's several ways that we could approach creating this. I want to create a sustained chord pad, okay? And there's several ways that we could approach this. We could like individually tune the oscillators to the notes and the chords by using like any sort of tuner we want. But I know a much easier way to just, if we're doing something really simple that's not going to change notes, where we can just create the exact notes that we want these oscillators to play. I'm going to go ahead and right click to go back to the menu here. I'm going to reset the filters. And what I want is, I want a tuner module, so I'm going to select tuner here in the tags, and I'm going to grab this reference tone module from Bog Audio. This allows me to set any note that I want. Let me see if I can zoom in for you guys just a tiny little bit here. All right, cool. And so like I can literally, if I wanted to play an F on my oscillator, I can select F4. I could choose a different octave if I want, maybe even a lower octave. I can take the volt per octave out of this, and I can route that into the volt per octave input of the oscillator that I want to control with this note. Now, I need 4 different notes to make this chord. So I'm going to go ahead and just tap on this module and Command D 3 times to get a total of 4 duplicates of this. And now I'm just going to tell these other modules what notes I want them to play. I'm going to try to make the notes here for an F minor chord. So we need a G sharp 2, and then we need, let's see here, we need a C3. And then let's go with an F3 as this last note. All right, just an octave up from the root. I'm going to take the volt per octave out of that second one and put it in the volt per octave input of my second oscillator. I'm going to do that same thing with the other 2 oscillators. So we're not hearing anything yet, but I've told now these oscillators what notes I want them to play. And I want to go ahead and route them into this mixer now, into this MAR mixer. So there's 4 oscillators and there's 4 inputs on this MAR mixer. So there's different waveforms we could take. I'm going to do this really basically today and really standard, nothing super fancy. And I'm just going to grab the saw outputs of each oscillator, the saw output, and I'm going to route that into the inputs of this mixer. Saw and saw. Okay, fantastic. Now we've got all 4 of these oscillators routed into this mixer. And if I start turning up these volumes here, we can see here in the middle that there's a signal getting through. I'm just going to bring these up a little bit. I'm going to leave the root note up a little bit higher in volume than some of the other notes in the chord. And it's a little bit maybe inconvenient to have to, if I want to adjust the volume here, to have to adjust all 4 knobs individually. So we're going to use a neat function of the MAR mixer from Nano Modules here. And I'm going to take the output of all 4 of these inputs, of the X inputs, and I'm going to route that into the input of this Y knob here. So I'll have control over all 4 levels using this one main master level type of situation here. Now, all I need to do is grab the outputs from Y. So over here, I can grab the output from Y, and I can route that to the input of our filter. Now, I want this to be a low pass filter, so I'll need to, which means it's going to cut off the high frequency content that's coming into the filter. So to hear anything by default, we're going to need to open this filter up all the way so that all frequencies are passing through. We're not going to be cutting off any frequencies at all yet, or doing any actual, filtering of that yet. And now we're getting sound to the mixer, and we're getting sound from the mixer to this filter. All I need to do is maybe bring the volume down on channel 1 here and take the output. Let me see here. Yeah, cool. Take the output, the low pass output here from the font filter, and route that in to channel 1 of the mix 8. And now we can start hearing that level. Sounds a little bit like low in pitch to me. So I'm going to go ahead and start messing with the notes that I'm sending these oscillators here, and maybe bring them up an octave. Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting more of a better sounding sound, for lack of a better way to say that. And I can filter this sound now. By adjusting this filter here. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to want to create some modulation. So there's some gentle movement starting to happen. And then we're going to add some more layers to this sound and try to create a more interesting and robust type of chord pad texture with lots of modulation that we can sample and then hopefully turn into some really neat and evolving chord stabs. I'm going to take 1 second and check in with the chat because this section has got me kind of, intense there. So I had to really focus to get that started. Hey, Wall, thanks for tuning in. All right, great to see you here. That is a great question. Tony asks, if this was real modular, would we do this the exact same way? And that is a fantastic question. And the answer is 100% yes, except for the fact that we probably wouldn't use like these reference tone pitches things to create a chord. If this was real world module, what we would do is we would individually tune these oscillators to the notes that we want by using their octave and their fine-tuning controls. There are reference tuners inside of my rack, but I don't really care for those too much. A lot of times I just like to take like a guitar tuner and plug that out into like my headphone output or something. So when I'm trying to tune things, I'll just use like a little guitar tuner. In fact, I think I have that here. What I've been using lately is just this cheapy little Donner guitar pedal tuner. This was like 20 bucks on Amazon or something. It's hard to get that in focus. Sorry, guys. But yeah, but for the most part, you would exactly do this the exact same way in real world module. And that's really one of the things that draws me to VCV Rack and to my rack, is that we're not necessarily learning software when we're learning this, but we're learning the real concepts of modular synthesis that 100% apply to real world modules. In fact, if we go back, I wanted to show this earlier, if we go back and browse the VCV Rack library, there's a way where we can, I believe, oh, for Pete's sake, now that I'm here, like I don't actually remember how it is. But there's a way to search here for like only modules that are clones of real world modules, for example. So that when you're learning those modules, you are learning, direct real world modules. A lot of these are just, software things per se, but like for instance these nano modules that we're working with here, these are exact duplicates of what I have in hardware, and they work exactly the same. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to be able to hear our pad moving and we want to automate this this filter cutoff. So let's go ahead and put in some LFOs, which is like a low frequency oscillator, so low in frequency that it's not really audible per se, and we use that to modulate stuff with. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the background. I'm going to select for tags, I'm going to select low frequency oscillator, and I'm going to grab this one here. This is a 4FO from Bog Audio. Let me zoom in so that I can show you what's cool about this real quick. What's cool about this is that it actually has 4 different outputs, and each output, if we look at these numbers down at the bottom, has a different phase, meaning like a slightly different running time, starting place in the sequence, in the modulation, than each other. So if I run 4 different outputs from this same LFO, it's not, everything isn't exactly glued together. It's a little bit more interesting. I don't want to say like loosey-goosey, but it's a little more loosey-goosey. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to move this, we're going to want, let me zoom out just a little bit here. Sorry, I'm a little bit clunky with the interface still. On my rack with the iPad, it is so easy to use because you're just pinching and squeezing to zoom in and out. And 90% of interacting with these softwares to me is just zooming in and zooming out. On the desktop, I have to do it by holding Command and hitting plus and minus. If I had a fancier mouse, we could maybe do it differently. I'm not actually showing that. I could, I can zoom in by just hitting Command and plus minus. But it's a lot less intuitive than just literally just interacting with the iPad is all. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to set this LFO to a nice slow rate, like dub techno and like the pads and that kind of music aren't necessarily like wobbling real fast like in dubstep music. Whoop, 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 whoop. It's like really slow and gentle evolution of the sound, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click the slow button on this LFO so we can make it, I don't know, a little bit slower just by default. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the output of, let's see here, this 0 phase. So the very first, phase at 0 LFO. I'm probably explaining that a little badly, sorry. And I'm going to route that LFO into the CV control voltage input for the filter. Now, we're not hearing anything yet because it's not actually moving that filter. What I need to do is I need to use this attenuverter knob to tell it how much I want to move this cutoff knob. So the more I move this knob here, the more it's going to move our filter. Now we can start to hear that filter open up. Now, the LFO by default here has some different shapes to the waveform that we can create. It's set to a nice slow sine wave, by default. But I really prefer a triangle waveform, so I'm going to set that to it's just a personal preference. It's, pretty similar. So I'm going to set this LFO to a triangle waveform. We got the Irrational Media Society in the chat. All right, thanks for tuning in. All right. Cool deal. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Now, if we're able to hear that the filter is actually going down so far, that it goes down all the way and cuts off all of the frequency content, literally muting the sound. And that's not exactly what we're after here. So what I need to do is I need to set the filter so it doesn't go down quite as low. And this is all just sort of experimentation as well. But it's a combination of how much the filter is open here and then how much we are sending the LFO signal to this knob as well. So we can hear it still going all the way down there. I don't want it to go all the way down, so I'm going to keep adjusting. Now I've got it opening up a little bit more, and I want that. Okay, but I don't want it to go quite that far down. So I'm going to use this attenuverter and I'm going to pull it back a little. So our LFO is affecting that knob a little bit less. Here it's going down now. And it didn't go all the way out, but it almost did. So I'm going to just adjust these a tiny little bit more. There we go. I want the rate of our LFO to be even slower, so it's really, really slow here as it's moving that filter cutoff. I also want to do a little bit of modulation on the resonance knob so that that sort of moves a little bit in time. Not in time, but automatically. Yeah, now we're getting there. Cool. So we're going to add a little bit of resonance. I'm going to take the output from the 90 degrees offset LFO, and I'm going to route that into the CV for the resonance. We won't hear anything yet, and we're probably not going to hear a lot anyway. This is a subtle thing we're doing, but I'm going to turn up the amount of movement and modulation we're sending to that resonance knob. So that LFO is now opening and closing this knob as well as our filter knob. I hope that makes sense so far. I'm going to turn this down just a tiny little bit and double check in the chat if I'm missing any questions. Great question. How would I compare VCV Rack 2 to Voltage Modular? Is that the one from Cherry Audio? I don't actually, I certainly don't have experience with all of the modular software that there is. I just have experience with my rack and with VCV Rack. I don't have any other experience with the other softwares. But what really draws me to my rack and VCV Rack over those other softwares is the fact that there's so many real world modules in this software. So when we're learning this and when we're exploring this, we're really learning real world modular, and these techniques will translate directly over. And that's really important to me personally. I don't have enough time to just learn like new software per se, but I definitely have time to play with the techniques that I use in here. I don't know if that makes any sense. Hopefully it does. Turn this back up just a little bit, and let's continue adding to this. So it's a very simple chord pad at this time. Yeah, soft tube modular sounds good, but it is very CPU hungry. Yeah, I found this one, to be honest, to be a little more CPU hungry than I would like it to be. And I think if I was directly comparing VCV Rack 2 on the desktop with my rack on the iPad, I think my rack on the iPad is quite a bit less CPU hungry, and we can add more modules in a patch. However, we don't get access to near as many modules. That is a closed environment. There's no like browsing the library and adding more modules. It's only what that developer is adding in per se. Speaking of CPU usage, one of the neat things about VCV Rack is if we go to the top tabs over here and click on Engine, we can actually select Performance Meters. And what that will allow us to do is that will allow us to see on every single module, it'll show you how much percent of the CPU going on is being used by that module. Now, looking at things and seeing like, 1%, 0.6%, whatever, it may not seem like a big deal, sort of by default. But if you're making a really, really big, robust patch that's starting to push the CPU, it actually would make quite a bit of a difference. And you can compare things by using these numbers. Like if you put two different filters in, one may be taking 0.5% CPU, whereas another one might be taking 1.5% of the CPU, and you can then make your choice as to what you want to use accordingly. You know what I mean? So I really like using that, turning the performance meters on and kind of getting an overview of what is taking, how much of your CPU per se. All right, but enough blathering. Let's keep patching. What I want to do is I want to add another oscillator so that we can get another layer happening in what we're creating here. And I want to add, I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it's the Seich oscillator from Instruo. And I'm just going to go to tags, oscillator, and this is now going to show me all of the oscillators that I have installed currently, and I'm going to grab this one. I just want to remind you that this was free at this time. You know, if this is the free version of a VCV Rack, and all of these oscillators were free. None of these are paid oscillators. We've got like the Erica Synths Black Wavetable VCO here. I mean, again, these nano modules are, you know, recreations of real-world modules. We've got stuff from Instruo here, which is really expensive real-world stuff. And what I want to do is this module is actually a polyphonic module, and what that means is that we can send all 4 of these pitch inputs into this one oscillator and create the same type of chord that we're creating here and layer that with what we've got here. So to do that, I've levels up a little bit more. I'm going to grab these reference notes and I'm going to bring these in here. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see just a little better. Cool. I'm going to grab the very first root note and I'm going to patch that into, whoops, can I not dupe those signals? Try one more time. No, we can. Cool. And then I'm going to take the second input. I'm going to route that into that volt per octave. So I'm sending, you know, these notes here to these volt per octave inputs on the, whoops, I didn't get that last one, on the Seich oscillator. Now all I need to do, I'm going to bring our volume up on the main pad that I've started. I'm going to bring channel 2 way down in volume because I'm not sure how loud this is going to be to start with. We're going to go ahead and patch this directly out into the input here. Ooh, sweet. Let's mute this one. So now we're listening directly to the Instruo Seich module. I'm probably saying that wrong, so sorry about that. Now if I mute that, so we can hear this one's kind of like an octave above right now. That sounds fantastic. That's creating a lot thicker of a texture. It's exactly what I'm after. But we don't have any movement happening on this new, chord sound yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to have, we're going to insert another filter, but rather than insert the same filter that we already are using, which is this font filter from Nano Modules, I'm going to grab a different type of filter just for the purposes of maybe getting a slightly different kind of sound, So we're going to go ahead and right click and we are going to choose filter so I can see all the installed filters that I've got. Now if I wanted a different filter, we could browse the library for a different filter, but I've got plenty of filters here. I'm going to grab this VCF from Bog Audio, which is absolutely one of my favorite filters to use in both my rack and in the desktop version here, VCV Rack, because it's a completely adjustable filter. It can be a low-pass filter, a high-pass filter, a band-pass filter, or a band reject filter. And that's cool and all, but it's got, your resonance controls, your cutoff, and you can send CV, so we can control voltage and we can modulate the cutoff and the resonance, and that's great too. But it has this slope control, which is really the most important thing to me. Your average filter, when you're using it, like in your desktop, is probably going to be what they call a 4-pole or a 2-pole filter, and that just refers to the steepness of the filter, like how much, if it's a low pass filter, we're cutting off the high frequency content when we run a sound through there. And so it's basically like how steep is that curve? How hard are we just cutting off and shaving off that frequency content? And I like to use a really, really gentle, like 1-pole filter if I can. So it's just really, it's almost like a polish. We're not like removing just huge chunks of frequencies as we would be if it was a 2-pole or a 4-pole filter, but we're bringing this down to a 1-pole filter by adjusting the slope here. Okay, I just bring this slope down to 2 or even all the way down to 1 pole. Okay, and this is a much more gentle effect now. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to route the oscillator into this filter. So instead of routing it directly into the mixer, I'm going to route it into the filter and then output from the filter into the mixer. So now this oscillator is being affected by this filter. Let me go ahead and just play you just this one. Okay, so we can, let me actually go to a 4-pole filter, which is their default setting and kind of the default sound of a filter that we're really used to hearing. It's got that, you can really, slide it in or take it away. We can add some resonance, and we can add a little bit more like harmonic content, which is pretty cool too. Let's keep a little bit of that resonance in. And let's go back down to say like a 2-pole. See how we just added quite a bit of high frequencies back in just by adjusting? Turn that up so you can hear that. Higher pole means a steeper curve. We're taking away more frequencies. Or we're making it a gentler slope and taking away less frequencies when we move this cutoff knob. And just making it a gentler filter overall, more gentle overall. Okay, what I want to do is I want to modulate this so that the cutoff moves the same way that the cutoff moves on the other, I'm trying to pinch and zoom with a mouse here. Okay. So what we want to do is I'm just going to take another output from the same LFO that we've got. This is why, move that over so you can see. This is why this, come on, move over, cool. This is why this LFO, the 4FO, is so useful, because we've got these 4 outputs, each with a different phase. So we're going to grab another one of these outputs, and we're going to route that into the CV control voltage input of this filter. Now, if I zoom in so you can see a little better, all we need to do is adjust this CV knob here for how much movement we want to happen on the filter knob. So you can see we've just filtered it right on out like we did before using the font filter. I need to adjust this up a little bit so that when our LFO moves, it doesn't turn the knob all the way down, but just most of the way down. You hear that? It's still taking it all the way out. So I'm going to make a little bit more adjustments here. Now it's opening it up a little more than it was, which I want. We're just hearing that new intro pad. Cool. All right. We're really close now. Now I'm going to add in the nano modules pad as well. Now, cool. The reason that I'm using, different oscillators and sort of like different LFOs to modulate these things is so we get this sort of a movement here instead of this sort of a movement here that's real steady. We want it to kind of move and dance around, you know what I mean? All right. That's sounding really nice. All right. If there's any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. And let me see if we've got... Hey, what's happening? We got Panda Cat in the chat. Panda Cat PK. This was my first rack. All right. Great pad already. Thanks, Void101. Yeah, these nano modules, man, they are really rich sounding. And they sound, to be honest, they sound even better in real life than they do in VCV Rack. And I don't have any intro. I don't have this module. This is a very expensive oscillator, for example. This intro module, but it sounds really, really fantastic here as well. I'd like to add one more layer to this pad so that I'm really trying to focus in like on the sound design element of our first element that we're going to work with today. So you guys can see how we can use VCV Rack in a few different ways. Because again, if you hang out, this is going to change in just a minute. We're going to sample what we've created, delete everything that's here, and then we're going to actually be starting from scratch patching something with the sound that we're creating now, but using it as chord stabs, hopefully. That's the intention today. So I just want to add one more layer of sound here. And so I want to add another oscillator in. I'm going to go tags. I'm going to go oscillator. I got quite a few options here, but there is an oscillator here based on a real world module, and this is the E340 cloud generator module. And what this is it is an if you guys are familiar with like a supersaw sound is like 7 unison detuned saw waveforms. Like it's like a Roland sound, like that Roland supersaw, kind of like a trance sound of the 90s, you know. So this oscillator is that. It has 8 detunable super saws, and it sounds absolutely fantastic. What we can do is we can just take our root note, this F3, and we can patch that, you know, into our 1 volt per octave, so that this oscillator is now playing an F3. We can take the saw output. Whoops, I'm going to turn that mixer channel down quite a bit before I route that into it. And we're going to mute the other 2. I'm going to bring up the master volume again. All right, cool. And then we're going to go ahead and just route the saw output, because I really want to use these detuned saws. We're going to route that into the input here and turn this up. Now, it doesn't really sound like much to begin with, but when we turn, again, let me move over here. When we turn this, I'm a little bit weird at navigating the screen still. Sorry, guys. When we turn this spread knob up, listen to what happens to the sound. We're now spreading out these unison waveforms from each other and getting a thicker unison detuned sound. We can get really extreme, like really extreme. Yeah, we're gonna keep going. You've got a lot of places you can go with that. I like it right about here. Just really gently detuned saw wave. And now what we've got, mute that so I don't have to yell quite so much. And now what we've got is some other controls on the oscillator, like this chaos control. And what the chaos control does is it starts kind of moving randomly around these detuned waveforms, making a more thicker and kind of more interesting sound. I'm going to unmute and we're going to turn the chaos up and get a little bit of movement happening on these detuned layers of the oscillator. Listen to this, how it starts moving. Do you hear how the oscillator is kind of moving on its own now? Without us having to do anything, right? This is a really amazing oscillator. And I do want to say that while like the intro oscillator, I don't believe is available in my rack, and a lot of the other things we're going to be using today are not available in my rack. Like there's no nano modules in my rack, but this E340 cloud generator module, for those of you who are my rack users specifically, this one is available, and I highly recommend checking it out if you're using my rack. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this chaos control up a little bit. We could also set the module, if we wanted to have like less waves. We could have either 2, 4, or 8 waves. Let me scroll through those options so you can hear the difference there. So there's with just 2. There's with 4. And then 8. So we're going to bring the level of that in the mix down just a little bit. I'm going to bring the overall volume down a little so I don't have to yell quite so much. Let me say hi to Mars Capone. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Let's see here. We've been going for about 45 minutes. All right, we're making really good progress today. All right, what I want to do is I want to create a little bit more modulation still. So we can do that by sending some modulation to this E340 cloud generator module. We can control the amount of chaos for one. We can control the amount of the spread also. So we can just kind of get a little bit more interesting modulation happening here. I think what I want to do to modulate the cloud generator is use a different LFO so that we get yet more just different like rates and like things are happening not necessarily synced to each other. For that, I'm going to grab this Oct module, which is a recreation of a hardware module. This is the Oct module from DivKid, and what it is it is 8 triangle waveform LFOs. Really handy. I actually have 2 of these in my real world systems. And we can slow these down with this rate knob, and this affects all 8 of the LFOs, or we can speed them up, make them really fast. I kind of like to leave it at about 9 o'clock. I find that's pretty good for getting some sort of slow movement in the bottom ones and still some medium type of movement in these upper ones. What I want to do, though, is I want to make sure that we're not sending a full width of an LFO, just this big wide signal to our destination. I don't want to make really big dramatic changes. I want to make really subtle changes at this time. So what I need to do is I need to attenuate just how much of that LFO shape is being sent over here to this module. I need to get just a little bit of modulation happening. And what we need to do that is we need an attenuverter. So if I right click to insert a module and I select attenuator from the list of drag downs, I can grab this offset module from Bog Audio. That's a really great attenuverter here. I could take an output from any of these LFO outputs I want. Again, the ones at the top are just faster than the ones at the bottom, so I sort of, experiment, or up to you to what, how fast or slow you want it to go. I want this to go relatively slow. Maybe we'll go one more up here. By default, it puts this scale knob here at 1 times scale. And we're going to go ahead and bring our volume back up. I'm going to mute the other oscillators there. So we're just hearing the cloud generator now. So we're just hearing, what I'm working on and what I'm affecting specifically. We're going to take the output here and we're going to route that into the spread. And now we're just going to kind of listen and see what that does to the spread. We can hear that it's changing it quite a bit, right? Oh, quite a bit. And that's why we want this attenuverter, so we can control just how much is happening here. Because right now, it's like way too much, right? All I need to do is just bring this scale way down. Let's try like 0.18. And then we listen to how much it's affecting that sound. I want it to affect it even a little less still. That's really subtle and pretty much what I'm looking for. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to do that same thing again, but I want to route it into the chaos input. Can I just use that same output again? Fantastic. So this is that attenuverted output right here, which is very small. It's set to literally 0.089. It's sending just a very small amount of modulation to this chaos knob and to this spread knob. So those are just sort of moving a little bit without us having to do anything. Now, the last thing I want to do before we sample this pad and start actually trying to create something with what we've created is I want to filter this sound as well, the same way that we did with the Nano Modules pad and with the Instro pad. Now let's see here. This is where, your creativity, really comes out, because you can either use the same type of filter that we've already used, or you can use, a different filter. The options are just unlimited here. And depending on what we choose, that of course is going to have, a dramatic effect on the sound. This time, I think we're going to grab a different filter. We're going to grab this nitrous filter from Volt Audio, excuse me, not Vert, but Volt rather, VULT. And again, this was a free module. So I'm going to take the saw output from our E340 cloud generator module, and instead of routing that directly into the mixer, we're going to route it into the input here of this filter. And I'm going to route the output from the filter into the mixer. Now, if I unmute that, we can hear that we're affecting it with the cutoff. Okay, cool. And I'm going to leave it maybe down about there by default. And we're going to grab another one of these LFO shapes. Now let me actually talk you through this real fast. There's sometimes reason why we need these attenuverters, and sometimes reason why we don't. Now, let me see if I can zoom in one more time. Cool. So here on the cloud generator, we don't have any built-in attenuverters. So anything I plug into this chaos is going to be the full width of whatever I'm plugging in. There's no way to adjust how much of that signal is affecting the sound. But some modules do have attenuverters built right in, and the nitrous acid filter is one of those. So here we have CV1 and CV2 built right in. How much of the signal that we're sending into CV1, how much of that signal is it going to affect, and how much of the signal from CV2 is going to affect. So this, we don't need any type of an attenuverter. I can go directly to the CV, directly from the output of an LFO, and then we can use the CV attenuverter here to control how much of the knob is moving. I really love modules that have built-in attenuverters, and when it comes to real-world modules, this is really handy and something awesome to have built in as well, because you don't need all that extra stuff like an extra, attenuverter modules to get those signals where you want them to be. Okay, so let's bring the level up again so we can hear what we're doing here. Cool. And let's adjust this attenuverter so we let the module know how much of this modulation signal we actually want to send to that cutoff knob. I start bringing this up and we'll start hearing that filter moving. Here it's filtering down now, so I'm going to start making some adjustments. I don't want it to go down that low, so I'm going to bring the filter knob up a little bit. We just want to listen to how much the filter opens and how much the filter closes. And the speed at which the filter opens and which the filter closes. Now I kind of know what sort of sound. Oh, that's really close. I'm just going to bring that cutoff up a tiny little bit so that it doesn't actually go down quite as far. Cool. And we're going to bring that down just a little bit so I don't have to yell over it. And we're going to do that exact same thing to the resonance input, the second CV input on the nitrous filter. I'm going to grab like a different LFO. So again, each of these LFOs is happening at a different speed from each other. So we're starting to create this type of modulation, right? Not this. Not just a steady everything at the same time, but things just kind of moving, right? That's what we're after with the different LFOs. And I want to remind you that we now have 5 different LFOs that we're using. This LFO down here has its own speed. This LFO at the top has its own speed. And now we have these 3 different LFOs, each with their own speed. So I just want to bring the CV up on the resonance a little bit, just a little bit, maybe like 13% or something. So it's moving the resonance of this filter as well as the cutoff. Now, if I bring in our other 2 sounds again, and try to mix this all together to where it sounds, I don't know, halfway decent. I think I want a little bit low. I think I want a little bit less low frequencies on this sound still. So that's why I put the EQ in the beginning. I'm going to pull some low frequencies out. I've got it now at like negative 14 on the lows. That's sounding pretty good. I'm starting to listen now to the mix of these sounds. I want that one lower. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to base these nano modules, that pad that we made with the nano modules, the very first. I really like the sound of those. So I'm trying to kind of make that the most prevalent sound out of these three like sounds, and then mix the other two to that sound. Just want to make sure I'm getting a nice good level that we're going to record in just a minute here. Checking the chat here. Yes, that cloud generator is absolutely making the sound thick, Douglas. It's a detuned oscillator that allows us to have eight detuned, unison detuned, sort of unison detuned versions of that waveform moving. So it does go down a little bit too low still. You can tell I'm taking quite a bit of time in this first stage because I really need to create something solid for us to work with in the second part here. Ooh, we're only at an hour. We're doing good. We're doing good. Thanks to everyone who's hanging out in the chat today. Hey, Steve. All right. Okay. I think we're pretty close. I just want to say, I keep looking off to the side over here, not because I'm not involved in the stream per se, but what I've got is I've got Ableton running over here with a couple of we can't really see that, sorry guys, but there's a couple of visualizers running off to my left there. And so basically I can kind of get an idea of the frequency content that I'm sort of working with, even in this beginning stage, and make sure that I don't have too much low frequency content in this sound. Yeah, that's looking and sounding really nice, I think. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and try to record this now. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and save. So like if anything goes wrong, or if the program crashes or some crazy stuff goes down, that we can still get back here. Let's go ahead and do a save, and I'm going to save this as, oh, I don't know, YouTube pad F minor temp or something. Cool. Fantastic. So we've got that saved. Okay, so I just need to record this now, and there are several options for that, as with anything in eurorack or modular or VCV Rack. Some of the not built-in, but some of the sampler modules that we have access to can actually do their own recording. And what we're going to do is, let's see, tags, recording. Cool. I just have one really basic module for recording right now, and it's actually just the default recording module from from VCV Rack, from this developer per se. It's not like a third-party plugin. And if we right-click on this, we can, let me see if I can zoom in one more level. If we right-click on this, we can set like what we want. Like we can set it to WAV or AIFF, or whether we want to record an MP3 even, or whether we want to record a video, what the sample rate is, what the bit depth is. I'm just going to record audio at this time, and we're just going to record a wave. I'm going to leave it set to 48 kilohertz and 16-bit. All that stuff is fine. And what I want to do is I just want to take from the master out here, I want to take the left output, and I want to route that into the left input. I want to take the right output and route that into the right input. And that's literally all there is to it. I just bring our volume back up, and now we can, that's coming out here should be going in. Why are we not seeing that? Did I do that wrong? On. I'm expecting, let me zoom in so I can show you. I'm expecting to see like my level showing up here is the thing, but I'm not. And now I'm like, what? Let's try this anyhow. I'm gonna try to label what I want to call this. I want to call this pad F minor 001. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong all of a sudden. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to take the audio from a different place. I guess this is probably another input or something. I think I'm screwing that up. I'm going to go ahead and take the audio directly from this limiter instead. And yeah, let's see how now all of a sudden we can see the audio level coming over here. That's what I want. All right, cool deal. I want a little bit hotter level still on the recording. So I'm going to boost all this up a little. Yeah, all right, that's better. It's hitting that -6 a little. All right, and lastly, what I want here is I gotta figure out which one is recording and which one is not recording. If I grab another one, okay, so the default stage is the light color. So when I hit that again, it will be recording. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to record 4 little snippets of what we've created already. So we've got 4 little individual sections of pad texture, recording that are all a little bit different in where they're moving. So like I'll try to record one where the filters maybe down a little bit more. We'll try to get a little snippet, and by snippet, I mean like maybe 10 seconds or so. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and try this. I'm going to bring our level back up and let's record a few versions. I've hit record, and now I'm just letting it record. Now I've hit stop. I just want to verify now that that sample is there where I want it to be before we move on. So I'm just going to grab a sampler real fast, and I'm going to try to load that sample into it that we just recorded and see if I can find it here on the hard drive, internal hard drive. Documents, Rack 2, recordings, pad FM01. Yeah, okay, so we did get it recorded. All right, so now we just need to do that. I just get a little weird that it's not recording or something, but it's definitely recording. So we're going to do that now 3 more times. I'm going to let it get down a little bit lower in the filter cutoff. I'll even adjust our filters down a little bit so that I know I can get like a more low pass version of this. Cool, cool. Wait till it's recording now. Okay. I still need a little bit more of a low version of this where it gets down even lower. So I'm going to adjust our filters down again so they go even lower. And I'm going to record again. Nice. All right, we're getting it. Tony's playing along on the Cobalt 8. All right. Yeah, it's going to be F minor pad. Well knows. All right, let me do that one more time. I'm just going to bring the frequency down on all the filters again so that we can get an even more tamed version of this pad. And I'm going to wait until it sounds kind of tame, and then I'm going to hit record. So it's kind of opening up now. Ooh, nice. Ooh, nice. Some really cool evolution in that last one. Okay, fantastic. So now what we've done is we've created this completely from scratch now. Thanks everyone for hanging out for the creation part. This is basically just a pad. We're just basically, creating a really basic pad type of texture with a little bit of movement. We could have done any number of things to make this more interesting. We could have put like a phaser in here somewhere. We could have put more filters. We could have put an individual filter for every single oscillator instead of running like all four of these into one filter. I mean, any number of things. We could have added some white noise to this and filtered that in and out so we get a little bit of like fuzz in certain parts. Any number of, we could have used different oscillators. We could have used wavetable oscillators. We could have added an existing sample, any number of things to get that texture created. Now, we're going to go ahead and save. We're going to go ahead and, whoops, I don't know why I did that. We're going to go new, okay? All I need to do is grab this audio out device and save that. We need to grab everything else by just highlighting it with the mouse and hitting the delete button. So we've got a brand new empty patch here. I'm going to go ahead and get a save on right from the beginning. You guys know I'm a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. There's a really big heat wave happening in Los Angeles right now. So, I mean, God forbid the power snaps and I lose like a couple hours of work. That would suck, So definitely getting a save from the very beginning is recommended. Let's call this YouTube dub thing temp, and what is this like? 0903. Cool. Cool. Now we got to save, and now I can just kind of hit Control S like all the time and not worry about anything. So we just need to tell this output module what our audio device is. That's the very first thing because it says no device by default. I'm going to grab it and we're going to select my audio interface, which is connected to the Mac currently. I'm just going to grab the 1 and 2 in and 1 and 2 out. We're just using a stereo, output. We're not doing anything fancy with the sound card today per se. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start adding all of the things that we need, that I think we need to start making a cool patch with. We're going to be patching, you guys know I love that like F minor dub techno stuff at about, 110 BPM. So that's what we're going to be, experimenting with putting together here today. Hopefully, I have enough energy there's some really neat techniques that I'd like to show you about how to turn, of some ways that I've discovered of how to turn some sounds on and off so that your patch is just kind of playing and you don't not necessarily having to interact with it in real time. Of course, that's fun as well, and we can also use MIDI controllers so we can really interact with things in real time. But one of the things that I'm really interested in eurorack is learning all of the techniques that just make things happen magically without me necessarily having to interact with the patch, and that's what we're going to try to create today. I'm just going to check the chat, see if there's any questions before I get started adding a bunch of modules, because I'm going to start really doing some serious patching here in a second. We're probably going to miss the chat for a few moments. All right. Good deal. Thanks for hanging out, all of you who are hanging out in the chat. I appreciate you being here. This one's probably going to get pretty long, but I do go through after these streams and add the timestamps so that it's easy for you to kind of go back through and reference different parts if you'd like to. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start inserting modules now, and we're going to insert a bunch of modules right off the jump because I know I need quite a bit of a setup to get this started with. A lot of people, when they're thinking of eurorack, they're trying to create new sounds or sounds you haven't heard before, or like work in a way that nobody's worked before. That's not really my bag. Um, I'm not really into just creating random sounds. I'm not really into creating like car alarms and robot farts and stuff like that. I'm really into creating music that sounds like music, and music that sort of fits the definition of Western music per se. So we're gonna create basically like a DAW environment here in which I can work with. That's real similar to working with those type of tools. All right, and here we go. We're going to start by adding some mixers. I know I need quite a few mixers, and I'm really into using this Mix 8 from Bog Audio. I wish it was a Mix 24, to be honest with you. But what's cool about this is that if I right click again, I can add this. This is an expander for the Mix 8. This is the Mix 8X. And as long as we have it butted up, sitting right, how they're right next to each other here, if I just have them seated next to each other, it's automatically connected to the mixer. I don't need to route any wires to connect these. It's now one unit. And what this is this is EQ for every single channel, and this allows us to have two bus sends as well. So I can send like a delay and a reverb to any of these 8 channels, and I can EQ any of these 8 channels. Now that's all well and good, but we're going to need a lot more than this to get going. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this Mix 8 twice, and I'm going to duplicate that Mix X one time. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. You can see we're starting to get a pretty robust mixer happening at the top. That's one of the things that I learned while making that first patch that I played at the beginning of this session, and that patch is actually online if you want to check it out. What I learned is that because when I'm working with something for like the first time or whatever, I typically don't really worry about how much CPU am I pushing. I'm usually trying to push as much as I can and kind of see how much I can push. But I ended up pushing too much CPU in that. So I'm going to try to do a few things in this that sort of help that or whatever. I ended up having to insert quite a few more mixers along the way. So I'm going to try to get that just set up for us now. Let me explain how I've just set these up, okay? I've got 8 inputs here, and next to that, that Mix 8, so it's connected. So I've got each channel with its own EQ and its own send. And then I put another one here, so I've got another 8 channels and another Mix 8. So each of these 8 channels has its own EQ and its own send. So between those two Mix 8s and the two Mix 8X, we've got 16 channels, each with their own EQ, each with their own send, okay? Lastly, we've got another Mix 8 at the end, and that's what I'm going to sum all these into, except that I've just thought of a better way to do that. So let's change that up real quick. I'm going to delete that other Mix 8, and let's go back into, we're in tags mixer. Cool. I've got this Bifaco ST mix, which is a zoom in so I can show you that. This is a recreation of a real world module, and I love this mixer. It's a stereo mixer. I think I have 3 of these in my cases spread around the room here. We're going to grab this to route our mixers into. We're going to grab the left output of our main mixer and route that into the left input here of the stereo mix. I'm getting it so we can mix these two together. We're going to take the left output of our second main mixer. We're going to route that into the these are stereo inputs, okay? I'm going to bring these inputs up to, oh, I don't know, maybe like about here for volume. Cool. And then we're going to route, what I like to do I like to get set up for like, making music. We're going to create a little bit of a mastering chain right off the jump. We're going to go ahead and we are going to insert a compressor so that we're going to gently compress the whole mix, the overall mix, get everything nice and glued together. We're going to take the left output from our main stereo mixer, which is mixing all of our other signals together, which we're going to get going. We're going to mix everything into this compressor here. I'm going to bring the threshold up for now. And I'm going to leave everything else set the same. We're going to take the, let's see here. I want to run from the compressor. I want to run everything into a limiter. You guys know that a limiter I always use as my last thing in my audio chain. It's going to help protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers. Speaking as someone who has rippingly loud tinnitus, you really want to keep those volume levels in check, okay? You really want to protect those earphones, those speakers, and your ears. So we're going to insert a limiter. I'm going to go tags, limiter, and we're going to grab this limiter here. This is going to keep anything from basically going over that 0 decibel threshold. We're going to grab the output here, and we're going to route that into our audio interface module that's connected to our audio interface. And I think I want to put a stereo EQ just in here in case I want to just kind of casually sculpt the master chain a little bit. So let's put that in now. We're going to put equalizer, and I'm going to grab this EQS from Bog Audio. This is a stereo equalizer, which is what we need. I'm going to grab the left output from our compressor, route that into the EQ, and our right output into the EQ. Then we just route the EQ into the limiter here. So left into left and right into right. So here, these, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. These basically 4 modules is basically our mastering section. It's got a compressor where we're going to very gently compress and squeeze together the whole mix. We can adjust the frequency spectrum in a very gentle global way with this global EQ. And then we can make sure that we're keeping everything nice and glued together and we're not pushing everything, or anything rather, over like the 0 decibel limit using this limiter. All right, now that's getting the mastering section set up so we can actually work. Let me go ahead and not mastering everything, but the mixer section as well. Now, we're going to be doing a lot more to this top row, and this stream is probably going to get pretty long still. What I want to do is I just want one more. Actually, I'm going to route. Yeah, okay. What I want is I want one more mixer still. The setup takes a while. And typically, what you would do is you would have something like this already set up and saved as like a starting template that you can go to. But I didn't want to load anything like that today and say, here's my template and this is what we're working with. I wanted to do everything from scratch, 100% based on that. This is my first live stream with VCV Rack 2. So if you're not already familiar with it, this is covering pretty much everything you need to know to get set up and running, right? So we're adding this other mix 4, and this all is gonna make sense as we start actually patching the sounds together. But basically, I'm just creating a mixer that we can route our sounds into. And we're going to keep expanding on this front row as we keep patching, because the goal is that we're going to have a mixer here that we can route through some gentle side chain so that anything we run into this mixer will be kind of ducked against our kick drum a little bit, keeping our kick drum really prevalent. I'm already thinking ahead to the production part because this is how I write. I don't necessarily like write and then mix everything later. I kind of do everything as one big global thing using all of the knowledge that I've accumulated kind of all as one big homogeneous experience per se. Um, so I want to be able to have a mixer that I can route things into where we can duck them against the kick, and I want to have another mixer that we can route things into that we can really duck things hard against the kick. So 2 different levels of sort of sidechain ducking we're going to be creating eventually. And this first mixer over here, this mix 4 that I've just added, is going to be our kind of default mixer where we're not going to be doing any ducking. And a lot of this is probably getting confusing. So let's just start adding some sounds at this time. What I want to do is I want to start by adding a kick drum. I really, as a sample based, guy who, produces samples and stuff, I really like to work with samples. There definitely are, analog kick drum modules inside of VCV Rack. You've got plenty of options there, but I really like to just, grab a sample for the kick drum. That way we know it's like not being generated with synthesis, and it hits exactly the same every single time. I don't really like my kick to kind of fluctuate really like at all in the way that it sounds. Um, so for that specifically, we're definitely going to start off with a kick drum sample. Hopefully this will be relatively quick and easy to accomplish, but we're just going to grab something from one of my sample packs here. I've loaded up this sampler from Lomas. This was a free sampler. Again, everything I'm using today in VCV Rack is a free module. None of these are paid modules. All of this is free. The software was free. This isn't the paid version. And we're going to go ahead and try to load a kick drum into this sampler. So I'm going to go to load. And now I just need to navigate to where my samples are being stored. Electronisounds packs, cool. And let's go. Let's just go to Prime Kicks and Prime Kicks. I don't want to spend a lot of time scrolling for a kick. I'm gonna pick this one here. It's called Dubba. I'm hoping this is that I did a good job when labeling and that it's an appropriate kick to use for dub techno. If not, then we'll do some scrolling. Now we're going to go ahead and start needing a clock, and we're going to need a way to start and stop this clock so that all of the modules and sequencers that we're going to be using, will know when the downbeat is. So I'm going to right click, we're going to go tags, we're going to choose clock generator, and I really like to use this clocked module from Impromptu. We're going to go ahead and set the BPM on this to 110. I'm going to check the chat, see if I'm missing any important questions. For a hardware system, we got a great question here. Would a bus compressor like the G compressor in the SSL6 be equivalent? Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. I mean, that is a fantastic compressor. I don't know if there's a limiter built into the SSL mixer or not. I would think maybe, but that's not as common as you might think, so there might not be. But yeah, if you've got that SSL mixer, congratulations. I think that's a pretty fantastic mixer. So I've got the BPM here. It's set that to 110 on our clocked module. And what I want to do now is I want to send the module for creating the clock. I want to send it a signal at the same time to run and to reset. So it knows, like, we're resetting now. All the modules should be reset on this downbeat. So like it knows when the downbeat is. So we need a way to send it two signals at the exact same time manually. And what I use for this is something called the big button. And we're going to go reset filters, and here it is right here. It's the big button from Incenthi. I'm going to grab this guy, and we're just going to put this up next to the clock module. If we hover, if I zoom in so you can see a little better, if we hover over the outputs here, if I hover over the output number 2, it actually says that input, the first patch point here rather, is an input patch point, and the second output is an output. So I'm going to, and that's connected to this first button here. So I'm going to grab this output and I'm going to patch that into reset, and I'm also going to patch that into run. So when I hit this button here, it sends both a reset and a run command to our clock module and gets it started for us. Okay. That was one of the most important things in really getting patches to sync together, is learning how to send that signal to both the reset and the run at the exact same time. Now, what we need is we need a sequencer so we can send some trigger or gate signals to trigger this kick drum. I just want to use like a 4 on the floor for that. And let's see here. That is the basic clock signal. When you have your clocked modulator set to ×1 here, that's sending out a quarter note pulse. We actually want this to be set and sending out a 16th note pulse. So by default, I set the ratio of our first clock. That's why I like this module. You can see here we have 3 different clock outputs: clock 1, clock 2, and clock 3. So I can set these to different settings, and they will all be in sync with each other because they're all using the same run and reset command. So if I want to send a 16th note clock out of clock 1, I just put the ratio of this clocked module to times 4. If I want to send a quarter note pulse out of the output 2, I just leave it to times 1. And that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to use the clock sequence to go ahead and trigger this kick drum sample to a 4 on the floor. All I need to do then is route that clock signal at times 1, which is that quarter note pulse, to the input here of this sampler where it says play. And we're going to need a way to hear this kick drum. So if I take the out and I route that into the in of our little tiny mix 4 here, we're not going to be doing any side chaining on this mixer. So it's just a separate mixer. I now want to run that mixer into the first inputs of the stereo mix, and then our other mixers into the inputs 2 and 3 accordingly. So I'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to run the output of this first directly into the input here. I'm going to put this volume the same as the other 3. We may need to do some adjusting on those levels as we start the actual patching here. I'm going to bring the level down because I don't know how loud this kick drum is going to be. And in theory now, when I press the big button, it's going to start our clock module going, which is going to start sending that quarter note pulse out to this kick drum, and we'll hear the kick drum. Here we go. All right. That definitely sounds like an okay kick drum to use today. All right, cool deal. So now I'm just going to take a moment and get that level where I sort of need it to be. Need to be louder still. Just trying to send the appropriate level out to the stream. Doing a little bit of adjusting on my main mixer here. Bring these levels up. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Whoops. Bear with me just a second while I adjust these levels. Yeah, we're getting there. Getting really close here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and set this compressor now on the master so that it's doing a very, very gentle amount of compression. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more there so you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, so right here, we can actually see this little meter, okay? And that's how much gain reduction is happening in this compressor. What I want to do is I want to just leave the attack and the release times set the way they are. I'm even going to leave the knee set to soft, just the default setting. And what I want to do is I want to bring the threshold down just enough until we actually start to see a tiny little bit of compression happening here. Okay, if I zoom in even more, you guys can hopefully see that. Now we're starting to see a tiny little bit of gain reduction happening right there. Now I'm going to back off this compressor to where I'm basically not seeing any compression happening on the kick drum. All right, and that's where we're going to leave it for now. That's just going to help us sort of glue everything together as we start working on this patch. All right. I think I need to remove the tiniest little bit of low frequencies from this kick drum. So we're going to grab an EQ really fast. I'm trying to go a little bit quicker now as it's been an hour and a half and we're kind of just getting started with the actual patching because we did the sound design portion from scratch in the beginning with that pad that we're going to use in just a minute. Alright, I'm just bringing down the low frequency content on this kick drum by just about 2 decibels. I'm pretty anal with the frequency content as I'm, creating. And we're going to go ahead and save at this time as well. Fantastic. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get ourselves an offbeat rhythm for this kick drum. Don't, you know, a little bit of a hat sound. Anytime I want to stop the patch, I can just use the big button. Okay, so that's sort of my on and off at this time as well. Really handy because, again, if we don't have that, then the patch is just always playing and there's no way to get it to kind of stop, you know, other than just turning the volume down on the master or something. Let's just do this really quick and easy and grab ourselves a hi-hat. Plats is great for drums too. Exactly. Yeah, Plats is great for drums. Braids is great for drums. Another one that's good for drums is what do I want to say? Peaks or there are a few modules, and there's definitely some that are in the VCV catalog library rather that I don't have installed. There are like over 2,500 modules in the library in total. I would definitely suggest that you do not just go download them all. It gets really ridiculously overwhelming. There's no reason to learn, you know, 2,000 to try and learn like 2,000 modules at the same time, right? Um, okay, I'm just going to grab another one of those samplers and we're going to bring in a hi-hat sample. I really like these particular samplers. They've got some really great settings on them. You can adjust the start point of the sample, the pitch of the sample, the end point of the sample, the attack of the sample, the decay of the sample. Really fantastic. I'm going to grab this EQ and I'm going to duplicate it by just clicking on it and hitting Command D so that I get it um, you know, another version of it because I know I want to take the low frequency content out of this hi-hat. So I'm just taking care of that right now. We're taking the out from this sampler into the in of this EQ. And let's see here. I am going to route that directly into input 2 of this mix 4 here. We're just going to click load and we are going to go, let's see here. I'm going to find out external. Electronisounds packs. Let's just go to my prime hats pack. And actually, let's not. Let's go. I've been working on a huge brand new pack for the Poly End Play that I am really excited about. And maybe we'll grab, there's a huge folder of samples, all recorded from the Erica Synths Techno system. Let's grab one of those hats just for fun, shall we? Or closed hat number 1. Let's just grab that one. I have no idea what we're grabbing here. What is that, a loop? I don't want that. Let's try closed hat number 2. Is that, what is that doing there? What am I doing wrong? Are these not edited yet or something? I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong there. We'll figure that out in just a second. I guess I have to edit these still. Okay, no worries. We're going to grab this from a different folder then. So much editing. Let's see here. Let's go from the lo-fi dub pack instead then. Grab a hi-hat, close hi-hat. Probably not that one, but we'll load once, we'll scroll through some other ones once I get it going here. We just need now a little bit of a sequencer to sequence this hat here. So let's go to the tags and go sequencer. I've got a really easy to use one here called Trig, TRG from Cockmock, looks like. And what I'm going to do is put little dividers between the sounds so that it kind of helps our brain keep things in order a little bit. I'm going to search for tags blank. And so we can I like these blanks from Nano Modules, real small little blank here. Just put in a little blank so I can kind of divide these and visually see where like the kick drum starts and, the pieces for the hi-hat now start per se. I'm going to duplicate that and whoops. I'm going to also duplicate that. Come on. I did something wrong there. Grab another one of those real fast. I don't know what I did. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, cool. So, just want to bring these over. This is for the hat. Okay. So I just want to take the gate output from this sequencer and route that into the play of the sample so we can trigger the sample. By default, this sequencer is a 2-bar sequencer. We're just going to make this we're just going to make this a 1-bar sequence. So I'm going to take the length here. We can adjust this anywhere from, 1 step or whatever, all the way to 32 steps. I'm just going to make it a 16-step sequence, and I'm going to put in some offbeat open hat triggers to use to trigger this open hat. We just need to clock this sequencer now, and we need to tell it when the downbeat is so that everything starts at the same, time together. So I'm going to take the clock from this, and I'm going to route it into our 16th note clock, which is clock 1 at the times 4 rate, okay? 4 times faster than our quarter note pulse kick drum. And I'm going to take the reset and route that into the reset output from our clocked module. So now when I press play using the big button, it resets this sequencer and it knows when the downbeat is. I'm going to bring the volume down on this hat and let's see if we can get a hi-hat into this pattern here. All right, so that's going at the the right time measurement. I just want to get a different hi-hat. Not that one there, but rather, let's go load. Just try a few different, did I just crash it by loading a sample? I think I did. VCV Rack 2 quit unexpectedly. Okay, well, let's ignore that. And it must have been like the wrong sample format or something like that. Clear your patch and start over? No. This is a great example of why we use that reset signal. Hear how the hi-hat now isn't triggering correctly? It's like instead of don't you. All we need to do is just stop the clock and then hit that again. And now we've got everything knowing when the downbeat is. I'm going to try to load a different hi-hat sample this time, and hopefully we'll find another one that doesn't crash my rack. Excuse me. I knew I was going to do that. I knew it. I called it my rack. And we're going to do something that's not crashing VCV Rack. Unfortunately, we are having some glitches, and it's not letting me load a different sample for some reason into this sampler. And I do want to try to do that. So I'm going to delete that sampler. I didn't have any of these issues when working with it over the last few days. So, of course, we're going to have some now. Let's go ahead and put the gate into the play and the output into the input and the load, and then let's grab another sound. Okay, so here we're going to go to my folder again on the external drive, Electronisounds packs. It's that poly int play packs and sample packs. Okay, I just want to double check that. Can I turn the loop off? No, it's not that. All right, just checking. All right, lo-fi dub hat. Is it really not? What is it? Oh, I see. It's letting me change the, okay, cool. It's letting me change the sample rather. It wants you to be able to have a folder with a bunch of, I forgot about this, with a bunch of samples in it that you can then use this sample knob on the module to change what sample is playing. So let's use this sample knob to select which hi-hat from this folder we want to use. Awesome. Yeah, let's get this started again by hitting the big button. And now we can just scroll and change the sample that way. There we go. There's a hi-hat that'll work for us today. Bring some lows down. Cool. All right. What let's do now is let's go ahead and save again. I'm just hitting Control S here. Let me check in with the chat and see if I'm missing any important questions. Yeah, so we've got a really great comment from, I'm probably going to butcher your name, so I apologize, but Les Tudos DG says that limiting also lowers the dynamic and therefore pushes to push up the volume and delivers constantly higher volumes. That's all correct and everything. But then he says, and bringing ear fatigue. I'm not sure limiting is always the best ear wise. For me, it is definitely the best. If I'm getting ear fatigue, I'll just turn the volume down. I definitely want everything glued together like that in the end, and I definitely want it protecting my headphones, my ears, and my speakers. I have it set not to bring a lot of the volume up and push into the limiter, but I do that as we're getting the patch more complete. Absolutely. Yes, I do. I do exactly patch that way for sure. Um, Okay, let's get a bass line put together. For this, I'd like to use the ONA oscillator from Nano Modules. I think it sounds fantastic. And let's go ahead and right click here and choose oscillator. And we're going to grab that ONA oscillator. Now, one of the things that I like to do, other than just using the blank dividers to kind of help divide my sounds, let's grab another one of these, copy it, and sort of put it there to divide the kick drum from the hi-hat there visually, is I'm going to put the bass sound that I'm going to try to create here, I'm going to put it on a whole nother row. So I've got like a row for drums, I've got like a row for bass, and then underneath that we'll use a row for like the melodic content. Okay, we've been going for about an hour and 45. Yeah, I think I've got it in me to get this where I want it to go today. So for those of you who've been hanging out the whole time, thanks for your patience. I know this is kind of a long, geeky stream today, but I definitely wanted to do like a full on, from scratch kind of thing. We spent that full first hour creating that pad sample that we're about to, bring in just a few minutes, but we're going to create the bass line first today. So what we need is a few different things. And again, there's so many different ways that we could approach doing this. And experimentation is definitely part of the fun. What I'm going to use to create this bass line is I'm going to duplicate this trigger module, and I'm going to bring this down here. Now I'm going to go ahead and right click on this and choose initialize to get it back to a full 32 step sequence. We're going to go ahead and clock it with our main clock 1 here, our 16th note clock, and I'm going to use our main master reset and patch that into the reset signal. So now both of these sequencers know when the downbeat is, and that's really important. Let's see here. So we're going to need a few other things. We're going to need a VCA. So let's go ahead and grab that voltage controlled amplifier. I really like to use I think we're just going to use this really default Bog Audio VCA for this one. We're going to need an envelope generator to generate a signal that can open up our amplifier and let the shape of our sound through. So we're going to need an envelope generator. I'm going to go to tags. I'm going to go to envelope generator. And I'm going to grab the ADSR. This is just the default one from VCV Rack. I really like this one because it's got a visual of that envelope shape that you're creating, right there on the screen, so you can see exactly what the shape is that you're creating. And you can also send control voltage to this and modulate this envelope in real time for really creative results. What we need is to trigger when we want this envelope to occur. So we're going to use the gate output into the gate input of this envelope. So when we set triggers here, it triggers this envelope shape. What we do with this envelope shape is we run it into the CV control voltage input of this VCA, which is our voltage controlled amplifier. Now, we just take whatever waveform we'd like to use. I'm going to start us off with this sine wave from output 1. I'm going to route that in to the input of this VCA, and then we just route the output from the from the voltage controlled amplifier, we route that into our mixer. Now this one is going to go into the first of the big mixers instead of the small mixer with the kick drum and the hi-hat. And why am I routing it into the different mixer? Because we're going to set this mixer up so anything I route into it gets ducked and sort of pumped against the kick drum, so that we're not getting conflicting frequencies in that low frequency spectrum, so that we can have some separation between the kick drum and the bass drum, for instance, so we don't just muddy up the low end. And that, so we always have like our kick drum as our most important instrument in the mix, just punching through all the time. Okay, so I'm going to bring the volume down on this because we don't know exactly how loud it's going to be to begin with. I'm going to open up our filter all the way. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't actually filter it yet. That's just the oscillator. Great. So what I want to do is I want to have a filter for this sound. So we're going to go ahead and insert a filter at this time. I'm going to go tag, filter, and I'm going to use the font filter from Nano Modules to pair up with, their oscillator. It sounds really good. And so instead of taking an output from the VCA directly into our mixer, we're going to route that into the filter. So out from the VCA, which is our amplifier, into this filter. Or we could do it that's what I mean with eurorack, how there's like a million options to do the same thing. We could even route this a different way, and I think I'm going to. We're going to route directly from the oscillator in to the filter. So we're going to filter the waveform before we worry about the volume of the waveform. We're going to open this filter up all the way, so we're not having any cutoff. Whoops, I'm not on the right screen. Sorry about that, you guys. What a buffoon. Okay, so I've got our filter here next to the oscillator. I've routed the oscillator into the filter. I'm taking the low pass output from the filter then, and I'm going to route that into the VCA. So the filtered signal of the oscillator is going to be going into the VCA. The output of that VCA then goes into the input of our second really big mixer here. Now, we're still going to need to add a bunch more stuff to make this happen. I'm going to scoot these things over. And what I need is I need a way to control the pitch of this sound. So we're going to need a quantizer. A quantizer is something that takes like an input voltage and makes it stick to a specific key or scale, so that we can write music that adheres to like the Western music scale, right? So I like this quantizer here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. I like this quantizer here from JW Modules because it is really, really easy to use. I can just set that to minor. We can just put this to our root key, F minor. Boom, there we go. We even have an octave shift if we want to, go down or up an octave on this signal. Now I just need a way to send an actual, voltage signal in here from a source. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate our baseline today out of noise. We're going to go ahead and insert a noise source, and this is going to create us a random evolving bass line rather than like a sequenced bass line that just plays the same notes over and over. This is going to create an evolving bass line. Not that there's anything wrong with a sequenced bass line that plays the same notes over and over. And like I said, there's really a million ways to approach this. This is just one way. Okay, so I've got the quantizer, and now we're going to need some noise. So if I filter by noise, I can just select the default noise module here from VCV Rack. And it's got a white noise, pink noise, red noise, different colors of noise that it's going to output. What I want to do is I want to shape this noise into a certain part of the frequency spectrum to pull our notes from. So I'm going to need an attenuverter to be able to kind of shape this noise source to create the range of notes for our bass line. So I'm going to search for an attenuverter. This is pretty like medium, intermediate level stuff here. So if this is confusing, you might want to come back to this stream later. There will be, like I said, timestamps put in the different sections where I'm focusing on these different steps to sort of like if you have problems or questions in a specific area. Okay, so we're going to grab, I really like to use for this, I like to use the dual attenuverter from Bifaco. This is a virtual recreation of a real world module. I actually have one of these in my setup. I really like this module. So we're just going to take a white noise output, which is just, I'm going to bring the volume here down. Whoops, wrong one, so that I can, just show you for those of you who might not be clear on what white noise is. It's just noise, right? It's just noise. It's the entire range of the frequency. It's like low frequencies, it's high frequencies, it's all the frequencies. And we're going to take that and we're going to shape it. So we're using just part of its amount of frequency content. I'm going to take the output here from the white noise into the input here of this attenuverter. We've got two different attenuverters, so you can use two in one module, which really helps for real world stuff to save space in your system. So we take an input from the noise into the input. We take an output from that noise into the volt per octave input on this quantizer, which is going to shape this into, the notes from an F minor scale. Now we take the output of the quantizer and we route that into the volt per octave input, which is the tuning on our oscillator, so that the notes we're sending through the quantizer are going to our oscillator. Now, let's see here. If we want to start hearing this, I believe we can do that now. By just actually putting in some notes on our sequencer. The sequencer by default, it defaults to a 2-bar pattern, which is cool. So we can create a little bit more of an interesting bass line than just a 1-bar repeat. Let me see here. 1, 2, 3, maybe here. Oops. No, maybe there. You're not really hearing it yet, but bear with me. Put one there too. Cool. Okay. So now the sound that we're barely starting to hear it. In fact, if I mute the kick drum and the hi-hat, we can hear a tiny little pop start coming through. And what this is now is it's based on all of these settings that we've got here. How much we're affecting the VCA with our envelope signal, and what the shape of the envelope signal is, and all of those things. So let's get a little more volume. All right. And let's go down an octave. So we're more in the bass frequency range. Start adjusting our envelope a little bit more like I'm looking to have it here. Making the release time on this bass sound a little bit longer still. All right, let's start playing this against the kick and snare here. So we're getting a little bit of a, offbeat kind of bass rhythm starting. What we're going to do is we're going to filter this down a little bit using the filter that it's running through. Taking some of the high frequency content away from that bass sound now. All right, let's filter it all the way down so it's taking all of that content away. And what let's do is let's use the envelope shape that's controlling our volume to also control the filter cutoff. And this is going to give us more of a subdued type of bass sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to patch the output of our envelope here from the ADSR into the CV filter input here on the filter. And we're not hearing anything yet because I don't have the attenuverter set to actually, move this cutoff knob. The more I roll this attenuverter up now, that's controlling how much of this filter knob is being moved every time we send the envelope shape to this filter. And I want it very subtle. It's set to literally 0.034, so we're just very gently affecting that envelope. Let's do the exact same thing with the resonance. Let's route the envelope shape also to the input of our CV for the resonance and move this knob for the attenuverter just a little bit. So we could get pretty dramatic, but we don't want that. We just want to subtly do a tiny little bit of movement on the resonance of this sound. Just very subtle here. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and just slide these units together for a visual, cleanness here. Let's move these over. Actually, I can highlight all of these, can't I? Right, good deal. There we go. Put these here. And let's sort of put this here. I think I want the release time on that bass a little longer still. Yeah. All right. Let me check the volume we're sending to the stream. I think it might be a little bit low. How's the mix sounding there at home, guys? I think I want to take a tiny little bit of low frequency content off of this bass. This is what I meant by I don't really like create and then mix and master as a separate step. I sort of do everything as one big homogeneous production, and that's just kind of how I work. So I think I want to take a tiny little bit of low frequency content off of this bass sound by default. I'm just going to right click. We're going to grab an EQ. And I'm just going to grab this mono EQ here from Bog Audio. And instead of routing the VCA directly into our mixer, I'm going to route the VCA into that EQ. So I can pull like 1 decibel of lows off of that bass. I'm really anal about the frequency content. I'm going to go ahead and save the patch at this time as well. And now we're ready to go ahead and start adding in some chord stabs. And what we're going to do is we're going to use those samples that we recorded at the very beginning of the session by making that pad, and we're going to turn those into some really custom and evolving chord stabs. I'm just going to check in with the chat here. Douglas asked a fantastic question. Would the quantizer be equivalent to scale lock functions in a plugin like Scalar? Yes, that is exactly 100% what the quantizer is and does. You got it, my friend. It is exactly the same. Exactly, yeah. So we've got a great answer here from Leitutos de G. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, except that it deals with voltage input instead of notes. So it's taking those, yeah, this is all like voltages. It's really interesting. In real world eurorack, excuse me, my brain doesn't quite have it like realized that what I'm really doing is sending electrical voltage everywhere. But that's really what we're doing. And it's really, really fascinating to me. Okay. Okay, good deal. So what we're going to do, wait, something about Mazatron. Is there Mazatron modules on VCV Rack? A golden shower would be handy here. I cannot stress it enough. I so agree with you. I really wish there was, because I would love to be able to use specifically that golden shower sequencer here. So awesome. Unfortunately, there are no Mazatron modules in here. I'm sure there are something that's sort of similar. Again, there's over 2,500 modules available. So pretty much whatever you need, you can probably search their, library of modules and find something that will do the trick. Okay, so Right. I want to go ahead and start creating something for the pads now. And what I want to do, I'm trying to keep in mind like how much I'm actually zooming out per se. And I think what I'll do is I'm not going to need the rest of this row for more bass, so we can probably just use that row to create these melodics. And what I want to do first is insert 4 samplers in which we can load those 4 different recordings that we made of the texture that we created. So I'm going to go to tags, I'm going to go to sampler, and I'm just going to grab that sampler that I've been loading up. Again, this is the low moss sampler. I really like this. Not only, again, what I found out by accident a minute ago is that you can, because I've forgotten this feature, is that you can load a folder of samples and then use this knob to scroll through those samples. So if you had a folder full of bass shots all tuned to C, for example, you could change what bass sound is playing throughout your track just by changing the sample. I mean, this is a really powerful sampler and can be used in a lot of ways. Cool. So let's just duplicate it 4 times. I'm just going to, tap it with the mouse and hit Control D 3 times. So we've got 4 instances of this. And now we're just going to load the sample that we recorded this morning. Rack 2 recordings and pad F minor 1. Awesome. I think I recorded that like those. The first one was a test. So we'll grab that and then load. Oh, please work. Please be here now that we're on the stream. Recordings, pad 3, because it looks like I might not actually be loading something in here. Let's see here. Did it not record? Please say you did. Let's just pop this into this mixer channel here. Whoops, so that I can hear it if it's there. Come on. Out. Bring this down. Because it looks empty to me right now, which is, nope. It did not record. It is, in fact, empty. Same thing here, then? Yeah. All right. Well, that is interesting in not a good way. Okay, let's try to solve this. So it didn't record our pad sample correctly. So it's good that we saved that session, right? So I can go back to that session, YouTube pad. This is our pad from earlier, and we should be able to hear our pad just by turning up the volume. For those of you who missed the first hour of the stream, what we did is we created this texture from scratch. I'm just going to try again to get this because I don't really know what else to try at this point. We are definitely getting input here. I believe I need to do. Let's change the name this time, Dean. There we go. Let's change that name. Whoops, rather here. Yeah, we're going to call this new pad F minor so that I know. Just bear with me for a second while I try and record this here. I'm pretty sure that did it. I'm going to go ahead and save. But it might not have done it. We'll find out right now when I go to load that sample. In fact, let me load it into one of these other samplers recordings. New pad F minor. Boy, it is not doing it, is it? Well, okay, that's a bummer because it was definitely doing it before. I'm not sure why I'm having issues. Whoops, with the with this, because see what it's doing here is it's just playing back a silly tone. That's not the pad, obviously. Or maybe I need to do this. Yeah. Oh, Dean, you idiot. Okay. So let me explain to you what is happening there and why I thought there was an issue, but there wasn't. That's just me being silly and forgetting the fact of how this sampler works. Again, I'm really used to using my rack for those of you who don't know already, and this sampler isn't available there, so it's new to me. And what I need to keep in mind is that when I try to load a sample into it, it's not actually loading a sample. What it is doing, it is loading the folder of samples. And when you've told it which folder of samples to pick from, then you need to use this knob to select which sample inside of the folder you want to use. So all of my original recordings that we recorded this morning are all here. They're working and everything is fine. I'm just being a dummy. What we need to do is not, reload or redo any of that. We just need to scroll this knob over, the sample knob, until it says, there it is, pad F minor 1. There we go. Okay, cool. So there it is. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. And I'm going to select a different sample for each one so that there's pad 2 inside of the first one, pad 3 inside of the second one, pad 4 inside of the third one, and these are the different recordings that we made. Just got to grab this one here, recording, and grab that new pad recording. Cool. All right. And then, actually, we grab that to say new pad F minor. Fantastic. So if I zoom in, you guys can see here that it says 2. This is pad number 2. This is recording number 3 we made from before, recording number 4. So it's not that I'm, the samples are messed up. It's that I'm being a fool and not using this knob correctly to select the right sample in the folder. But now that we've done that, we can go ahead and move forward. And what we need to do is we need to create an interesting way to trigger these different samples so that it's not triggering the same chord sample each time. Actually, let's go ahead and just run this right into the input so that I can play for you what these actually sound like. Cool. So you can tell that they are, long recordings, a few seconds, right? And there's that evolution of the sound built right into the recording, where it's moving from that filter stuff that we programmed before. Now, the reason if I didn't really make this clear, for those who might not understand, like why did we do that whole other section in the beginning and create that pad and record it and then do it this way? Well, one, we're going to use that pad like in a different way than just letting it play out. And two, we're actually saving CPU as well, because it took, quite a few modules, like a lot, 20 some odd modules maybe, to construct this pad, whereas now we're just loading the sound. No modules are taking to play back that sound. I knew this was going to be a long stream. Okay, we're 2 hours and 10 minutes into it. Hang on, everybody. We're getting there. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to start triggering these recordings, and we're going to make them play as, short chord stabs using the attack and decay and start and end settings in these samplers. What we need is we need a way to tell the chords when to trigger. So I'm going to duplicate this trigger sequencer that we've been using, and I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to duplicate this blank so we can just kind of put a little divider, between these sounds. Over on the left is the bass, and I'm going to make a bigger divider actually. So we're going to just go in here and just go tags, blank. I'm just going to grab this bigger divider so it's a little more obvious that I'm dividing these sections up. Okay, I'm going to grab our clock to this sequencer from our main 16th note clock, clock 1. I'm going to grab the reset. I'm going to grab that from the main reset. So when I hit that big button, all 3 of these sequencers now reset and start the downbeat together and know when the downbeat is. I'm going to right click on this sequencer and initialize it so it takes those triggers away. I'm going to control save so I don't possibly lose anything that we've done so far. Now what we need is a creative way to trigger these samples so that it randomly decides which of these 4 chord stabs to play back. What we're going to do is we're going to use a Bernoulli gate to make this happen, and we're going to get that by right-clicking, and we're just going to go to tags. And here it's not a tag for Bernoulli gate, but there will be a tag for the brand Audible Instruments that I have installed. Reset filters, brand, Audible Instruments. Okay. And Audible Instruments is some virtual recreations of the mutable instruments modules. So you've got, these are all recreations of mutable instruments real world modules here. We've got braids, we've got plats, um, we've got blades as well, marbles here, peaks. Um, and what I want to grab is I want to grab their branches module, which is just known as the Bernoulli gate here in VCV Rack and My Rack. And what this is when you send a trigger or a gate signal into it, it does basically like a virtual coin toss, and if it comes up like heads, it's going to send, let me show you, zoom in a little more. If it comes up like virtual coin toss heads, it's going to send that output signal from output A. But if it comes up like virtual coin toss B, or tails, it's going to send the output out of the second output. So here what we're creating is we're creating a bit of randomness on what triggers are being triggered, okay? And we need 2 of these Bernoulli gates to make this happen. We're going to take the trigger from our sequencer and route that into the input of the first Bernoulli gate. So when a trigger or gate signal comes out, it's going to trigger this module. We're going to take an output. It's currently, the knob is set to 50%, so it's like right in the middle by default. 50% chance that it's going to roll heads, 50% chance that it's going to roll tails. I'd like a 75% chance that it's going to roll tails, basically. So I'm going to set that, the probability, to about 75%. Okay, now this is a little complicated, but I'm going to take the output A, and I'm going to route that into the input of the second one here. Okay, I'm going to take the output B, and I'm going to route that into a different input of another one of these modules, right? So it might trigger this one down here. It might trigger this one over here. You get what I'm saying? Now, we just need one more. So if it triggers B on this one over here, that it's going to trigger this one over here. And now what we've got is we've got a whole bunch of random options as to what it's going to send that output to every time I send a trigger to the main input. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, Omri Cohen has a fantastic video specifically on how to use this Bernoulli gate module. And I highly recommend checking out his channel in general. Omri Cohen is a great teacher for VCV Rack, and there's no way that I would be as far into, real world eurorack without learning a lot from watching Omri Cohen's tutorials. Okay. So again, if you're not clear on what the Bernoulli gate is, check out his tutorial on it, because it's a lot more in depth than I'm going to go to here. But what we're going to do is we're going to start now taking outputs of these, and we're going to route them into the play of these samplers. So maybe it'll choose output A. Maybe it'll play the first sample. Well, maybe it'll choose output B and play this sample instead. Or maybe it'll choose this output, which I'm going to put on this sample. Whoops. Or maybe it'll choose this one, which I'm going to put on this sample. I'm going to put this probability all the way to the left. So if a signal comes in here, it won't send out of the empty output at the end. Okay, now what we need to do is I'm going to bring the decay on all of these samplers like way down, so it's not going to play a really long sample, but rather a shorter sample. And what let's do is let's zoom out a little bit so that I can get the mixer in here. Cool. We're going to save that first mixer for, okay, cool. So we've got this mixer over here, which I'm going to start routing these into. So output rather, of the first one, whoops, come on, into the input of our second mixer. So again, I really want to get what the point of having these different mixers is. This first mixer is running our kick drum and our hi-hat. There's not going to be any side chaining happening on these sounds. The second mixer is currently running our bass sound. We haven't done any side chaining yet. And our third big mixer, I'm going to start routing our melodic content into. And we're going to do some side chaining on that against the kick. So I'm running these two different mixers so we can get two different levels of sidechain compression and pumping against the kick drum. We'll get to that in just a minute. So we're going to route the output of all of these basically chord stabs that we recorded, basically chord pads at this point. We're going to take all these outputs and we're going to route them into the mixer. So now, if I play these samples, we can hear exactly how long or not long they are. And I can make them all, this is really important. This is why we have 4 different variations, okay? Is we're going to make them all a little bit different from each other. One will be like really long, one will be like really short, and they're triggering, you know, that same sound, but different parts in the evolution of that sound. So here if I trigger, I'm going to bring the volume on this particular mixer I want to bring up. So what I want to do is I want to bring in to glue these chords together basically individually from everything else. I'm going to bring in, whoops, I'm going to clear these, reset the filters, go to tags, and go to compressor. I'm just going to compress these chords a little bit together by putting a compressor here. And I'm going to route our mixer into this compressor instead of going directly into our submixer. I use a lot of different mixers to get the signals how I need them. I hope I'm not confusing everyone with that. Now, anything that's coming out of this mixer is going into this compressor. Now, I'm not using this for side chain at this time. I'm just using it to gently glue these chord stabs together and add a little bit more volume to them. Okay, so I'm bringing the threshold of this compressor down a little tiny bit, excuse me, and I'm bringing the input gain up and the output gain up just a little tiny bit. So now we'll be able to hear these chord stabs a lot better in the mix when I trigger them here. I'm trying to get them to different lengths. Whoops, wrong button. Yeah, cool. Bring all those up just a click. Okay, so we have 4. I'm going to save again. So we have 4 different decay times now, which is really cool. But what would maybe be cool as well is if we could individually filter this, but we'll probably get to that in just a minute. Right, okay. I definitely want to pull some, I'm also, yeah, like I said in the beginning, you know, I definitely kind of mix everything as I go as like one big, you know, process. I know I'm going to want to pull a little bit more low frequencies off of these chord stabs to make sure that I have plenty of room in the frequency spectrum for the kick drum and the bass drum. And that's why we've got these Mix 8X's installed so that every channel has its own EQ. So here I can go to all 4 channels that are bringing in the chords, and I can bring the low EQ down on these by maybe like 3 decibels, just shaving off a tiny little bit of low frequency content from these chord stabs. All right. Good deal. What we're going to do now is we're going to play, and I'm going to start triggering these chords against the rhythm of the other things we've got going. Okay. Our bass line right now isn't really a bass line. It's just hitting like one note, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, and we're going to flesh it out and make it hit more notes and be more creative. But we want to sort of mix these chord stabs in first. I'm going to just try to figure out where I want these to come. Is it here? Ooh, Trying to decide if I want it. I think I want it on that. Okay, cool. So what we've got now is we've got a 2-bar sequence that's triggering these chord stabs. And I can't stress this enough. Every time it sends this gate signal into the Bernoulli gate, it rolls that virtual dice and it decides which output it's going to go into. And so if it goes into this input here, then this one rolls the dice and says, which output am I going to come out of? So we're currently scrolling between all 4 of these. I'm pointing like it's the iPad. All 4 of these chord samples, and we're triggering different ones, you know, every time we hit one of these triggers. I hope that makes sense. We need to get this quite a bit louder still. All right, so now, let's see here. Cool. Let's go ahead and save at this time. And what let's do now is go ahead and get some effects, defined chord stabs. Okay, well, I can mute the other sounds. What I mean by a stab specifically, like instead of like, normally we might just hold the pad down and it might just be like a sustained evolving sound. But what I mean by a chord stab is literally just that, a bung, bung, and then it sort of stops. So the difference is, here we're hearing like this, the pad sound isn't just sustaining, but it's actually playing those little stabs rather. And if we solo it like this, we can really hear how it's actually, and we can look, you know, we can solo in or zoom in and see how it's triggering the different stabs. And each of these is like a different, you know, recording of the evolution of that pad we created. One of the things we can do as well to create some more interesting evolution in this is we can actually modulate, for instance, the sample start time so that each of these 4 samples isn't necessarily playing from the very beginning each time. And that's something that we can do as well if we have enough time on the stream, and hopefully we will. We're going for about 2 hours and 23 minutes. I think I'm doing okay. My cup of coffee's holding out. All right. Hey, what's happening, Russ? Thanks for tuning in. All right. So yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to add some effects now so that we can send these chord stabs through some delay and some reverb. We want to make it so that everything we send into these mixers, we can route to the same delay or to the same reverb. So let me just move these samplers up against their other modules there. Fantastic. Whoops. Get them all the way. There we go. Cool. And okay, so I want to add a reverb and a delay and use those as send effects to this mixer. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to clear these filters, and I'm going to go delay. And we're going to use today, let's grab the ChronoBlob 2 delay from All Right Devices. This is a emulation of a real-world plugin, of a real-world module. I really wish I had one of these in real life. It's a fantastic delay. Now I'm going to add a reverb. So we're going to right-click again. I'm going to clear these filters. I'm going to go reverb. And now all the reverbs I've got installed are going to show. I'm going to grab this plateau reverb from Valley. We're going to get that installed. And I'm going to pop that up here now. Now our top row is getting pretty robust for these mixers and stuff. So maybe what I'm going to do is, instead of adding those here, is maybe I'll put these down beneath here. All right, good deal. And what I want to do is I want to, when I'm routing my effects into these effects, I want to make sure that I'm not sending any low frequencies into the reverb or into the delay. So I want to make sure that I'm shaving off any low frequency content before it hits these effects. And when I do that in the effects send and return chain, it doesn't affect the actual sound itself, but rather just the frequency that is going into the effect. And let's get that set up now. What we need is we need 2 mono EQs that I can shave the low frequencies off with. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to right click, clear these filters, go to tags, go to EQ, equalizer. So it's going to show all the EQs that I've got installed. I'm just going to grab this mono EQ from Bog Audio. I'm going to touch it, hit Command D, so I've got 2 of them. Now I'm going to put each of these, right before the effect module. And what I want to do is I just want to route this from the mixer, okay? So from the Mix 8, again, if we have the Mix 8X butted up right next to the Mix 8, then they're connected. We don't need to do anything. It's just automatic. So here I want to send, if I zoom in so you can see a little better, can't quite get all this on the screen like I want to, sorry. But I'm going to take the send out from the Mix 8X, and I'm going to route that into the input of that. Come on, and route that into the input of that EQ. I'm going to take the output of the EQ and route that into the, into the left input of our delay. Now we have a stereo return, so I'm going to grab left and go back into the left return. I'm going to go right, go back into the right return. I'm going to turn this return level up just a little bit, and we're going to do the same thing for the reverb send. I'm going to take send B, okay? I'm going to route that into the input of our EQ. I'm going to take the output, route that to the input of our reverb, and I'm going to route the left output into the left return, and the right output from the reverb into our right return. I'm going to bring the return level up just a bit on this, and I'm going to Control S or Command S to save. Now we've got this, effect system connected to our mixer. So anything, if I zoom in even more here, anything on Mix 8 here, X, and on the Mix 8X next to our Mix 8, these are our channels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've got our chord stabs running into these 4 channels. So if I bring up, let's go ahead and start dealing with that delay first. I'm going to send a pretty hot send to the -21. Let's send -21 to all of these 4 chord stabs and start getting some delay happening for that dub techno delay type of sound. Cool. Let's see here. I think that's all we need to do to start hearing it, and then we can adjust the delay. It's really subtle still. So I need to turn the dry wet on this effect up to a fully wet because it is a send return. I need to do the same thing with the reverb, make it fully wet because it is a send and return and not an insert here. Save. Okay. Let's go ahead now and try to clock this delay so it's a little bit more in sync with our patch. I'm going to take the sync trigger input here. If I zoom into this chronoblob delay, whoops, we can see right here there's a sync input. It says sync trigger input. And I'm just going to route that to our clock module. Sync trigger input to our main 16th note clock to get that delay, knowing what our tempo is. Now what we're going to do is we want definitely some more delay. I'm going to bring that delay return up. Yeah, I'm going to send more of this delay. There we go. So we start really hearing that now. I'm going to turn the feedback up on this delay so that it's feeding back a little bit more. Now I'm going to just adjust the time so we can maybe get it a little bit more. Starting to hear some of that delay now. And if I bring our drums back, all right. So it took 2.5 hours today from scratch, from absolute scratch, to get to where we are. Now, obviously, if I was just sitting here patching on my own, this would go a lot faster because I've been taking the time to explain every step of the way. But this is basically how we're doing it, One sound at a time, one step at a time. It helps if you kind of have a goal in mind, you know. So I knew I wanted to create some type of a dub techno-y type of sound, type of a vibe. So we created that pad that we could then, you know, use as our own sound designed sound to turn into these stabs. I can get a little bit more level out to the mix still. Out to the stream, I mean. Okay, now what I want you to listen to here specifically is how these pads are kind of evolving. They don't always, you know, sound the same. Some are shorter hits, you know, some are longer hits. Sounding pretty good, but it's sounding pretty kind of samey still because there's no filter movement happening on these chords at all yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's run all of these chords through some type of a filter. And what let's do to make that happen is what? Again, there's so many ways that we could approach how we're doing this now. I think what I want to do is insert two different filters and put one on the right channel and put one on the left channel. And we can modulate those filters just maybe a little tiny bit differently to create more of an interesting sound. So we're going to go tags, we're going to go filter, and we're going to grab this VCF here from Bog Audio, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. I'm going to just pop these up here, and I'm going to route this entire mix 8 through these filters so that anything that's running into this mixer, so far it's just our chord stabs, but anything that's running in through here will go through these filters before it hits that compressor. So let me go ahead and take the left out here, and let me go ahead and take the right out here. Then I'm going to patch the left out into this, into this filter, and the right out into this filter. Okay, I'm going to grab a couple more of these blanks here so that we can sort of divide up our sections again and make it a little bit more straightforward. Like here we have the effects within this little, within this little, for Pete's sake, this little block here, and then I'll put a blank till we divide those up, and then we have these filters. All right, cool. So what I need is I'm going to need to modulate these filters. What we'll do is we'll maybe set them differently. Maybe set the one on the right to 2.5K, maybe set the one in the middle to the one on the left to 2K. So they're a little bit different by default. If I press play now, we're going to be hearing these chords running through those filters. And I can remove, those high frequency content and filter these down. Now those chords are, pretty much gone, right? All right. What I want to do is I want to set these filters to a less of a slope. I want to set it to like a 2-pole filter so that it's a more gentle effect on the sound. All right. Okay, and now what let's do is set some modulation on each of these filters. But let's make the modulation each from a different source. So we have the really big, robust, oh no, we don't have that. That was on the original patch. Great, we'll add it now. We're gonna grab the DivKid Oct module, which is 8 triangle-shaped LFOs. I'm going to just reset my filters here, and I'm going to go to low frequency oscillator. And here it is. We're going to grab the Oct module. I'm just going to set that next to these filters here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the rate on Oct to about 9 o'clock. That's where I pretty much keep it to get a nice range of speed. You can see that top LFO there is moving pretty fast. Whereas these bottom ones here, you don't really see that LED changing at all. It's moving pretty slowly. And I'm going to grab, let's grab like the fifth output and route that into the filter one. Maybe grab the one that's one click faster and route that into the CV of the filter number 2. Now I just move the attenuverter for how much CV I want, how much modulation I want to affect on each channel. I'll set those a little bit differently. So we've got both filters now opening and closing at a different speed on the left and right channels, just to get a little bit more interest in the sound, some more movement in the sound. We baked in some modulation on that pad before we recorded it, and now we're adding more modulation on top of that. Only hearing the right one, so I need to start adjusting how I'm filtering these so that we're, getting them to sound the way we want it to sound. Ooh, yeah, getting a little bit of stereo separation now. If you're listening on headphones or monitor speakers, you can probably hear some of that stereo separation start to come through. Trying to bring the volume up a little bit on the chords, because I want the chords to sit on top of our bass. Bringing the hi-hat up a little bit. Yeah, all right. Yeah. Let's add the reverb now. What I want to do is all 4 of these chord stabs are being sent to just the delay right now. And we want to send them to the send B as well, which is our reverb. And I'm going to send each one to a little bit different amount of that reverb. So each of the 4 chord stabs is yet a little bit different again, right? This plateau, I'm pointing like it's the iPad again, sorry. This plateau reverb from Valley really sounds fantastic. I think you'll agree. And if I just shut up for a minute and we just listen to the groove, what I want you to hear is how, without me touching any of these knobs, how things are starting to evolve and how those chords are starting to kind of move around, right? Got some stereo separation happening in the chords. I'm trying to make it a little bit less of that still. These are real finite adjustments I'm making on the amount of modulation that's happening. All right, we're definitely getting there. Cool. And I'm hitting Command and S like every 3 seconds, because I am a chronic oversaver. So that's, if anything, if we lose power today, it's a very big heat wave here in Los Angeles. There's a little bit of a chance we could lose power, stuff like that. So I'm definitely oversaving today. Okay, we've been going for about 2 hours and 45 minutes. Really long one today. We've got Douglas saying, I've been doing a voltage patch inspired by you and trying to get the chord stabs to work. Yeah, right on. The most important thing is just to have them running through an envelope. Even if you're running even if you don't record them out or something like that, you can just send, if you've got like a constant sustaining pad, if you just take that audio and route it into a VCA and then use an envelope to open and close the VCA, that's how you make the stab shape. But I want to do some more modulation still, quite a bit more on these sounds. So we have these sounds basically playing the 4 samples that we recorded from the pad we created. They're all playing from the very beginning of their sample each time. But there's a knob here for start point of the sample. And you can see we're literally moving the playhead through the sample as we roll this start knob. Now I would love to just automate some of these start knobs to move. In fact, let's start them at different points. Let's start that one right about there. Let's start this one more like here. Let's start this one, I don't know, a little bit in. So now, not only have we recorded 4 different samples in the evolution of the modulation of that pad sound, but now we're, starting them in different points of where their modulation is happening as well. And we're going to modulate these start points just ever so slightly so they're moving around now as well. Let's make that happen. I'm going to get Command S and save. I'm going to zoom out and we're going to add another LFO. I'm going to reset these filters. Let's grab that 4 FO again that we used in the very beginning from Bog Audio, because this one has 4 different phased outputs, so they're not exactly the same, but more kind of like this rather than like, okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab some attenuverters now. So actually I think I want to grab some different ones. So I want to control how much of the signal we're sending to that start point. So it's not just sweeping through the entire sample, but just very gently moving around where in the waveform the start point is happening. So we're going to reset these filters and grab an attenuverter or attenuator. I'm just going to grab this offset here from Bog Audio, and I'm going to duplicate that. So we've got 2 different ones. I'm going to tap it, hit Command D to duplicate it. Zoom in a little so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to take this first. I'm going to make this a slow LFO. I'm going to bring the speed down quite a bit. I'm going to take the first output and route that into the input here of the first offset module. And I'm going to take the second output and route that into the second offset module. This is going to allow me to make the scale of our LFO really, really small. So I'm going to bring the scales on these down to like 0.2 and like, I don't know, 0.25. I mean, really small, but a different amount on each one, right? Then I'm going to take the out and I'm going to just randomly start routing this into the start points so that all 4 samplers are moving where in the waveform the sample is starting each time for a little tiny bit more evolution in the sound. I'm getting a little bit lightheaded. It's been a long stream and a lot of coffee. So I'm going to buy this granola bar. All right. All right. Now sorry about the eating on the stream, guys. But now when I press play, we're going to get some automation on the start point of those samples. All right. Now, I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. I'm trying to point at it again. You see how these are moving? So it's evolving where that sample is playing from each time it hits, right? All right. Woo! So what we've got is a really evolving chord pattern with these stabs built out of a sustained pad that we created in the beginning. Pulling a tiny little bit of low frequencies off of those chords. All right. Yeah. All right, let's do, I know this is getting to be a really long stream today, but we've come this far, and I'd like to do 2 more steps, add 2 more sounds rather. All right, thanks for your patience and sorry for eating on the stream. What I want to do is I want to add in another version of the pad that we created in the beginning of the stream so that we can use that as a sustained sound, okay? So the easiest way to do that is just to load in another sampler. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to reset these filters, go to tags, we're going to go to sampler. And I'm just going to grab another one of these, the same sampler we've been using, this the plain old sampler from Lomas. We're going to go load, and we're going to go rack 2, recordings, cool. We're just going to grab that last pad recording we made there. And then we're going to move the sample. Right, I need to move that sample around. Okay, no worries. I think it was number 6, right? Yeah, number 6. Okay, that one's different. So I don't have that exact recording playing anywhere else. So that's, I guess I have 5 now recordings of that pad sample that we made. Okay. What I want to do is I'd like to see if maybe we can get this like as a sustaining sound, but definitely pumping against the kick drum. So what I'm going to do is, that's the bass line. I want a pretty heavy pump on this, so I think we're going to pump this individually rather than, it sounds odd the way I'm saying it, so sorry, but what I want, I think, is I need 2 things to make this happen. First, I need an EQ, and then I need a compressor that we can use to sidechain compress this. So we're going to go ahead and insert those at this time. Let's go ahead and insert an EQ, reset, and go tags, equalizer. And then I want to go reset, compressor, and we're just going to grab this presser from Bog Audio. If anyone had any questions on whether eurorack was a fast thing, it's really not. As you could see, it takes quite a bit of time, and the reason is because, like, you know, when you're using like a hardware synthesizer or something like that, you're scrolling through presets of the internal, you know, settings. These are the internal settings per se. We're creating every single thing step by step from scratch. There's no like grab a piece and just bring it in. So it takes a lot longer, you know. Now I want to go ahead and start routing this new pad that I brought in though. So we're going to go out from the sampler into the in of that EQ. I'm going to pull some of those lows down by default, maybe like 14 decibels. We're going to go out to the in of the compressor, and then we're going to take a stereo out from this compressor into the same input that I'm running the chord stabs into this mixer up here at the top. This is channel 7 and 8, so I want to put a little bit of our delay and reverb, both on that. So I'm going to go ahead and route channels 7 and 8, whoops, to the delay and to the reverb. I'm going to save again. Okay, I'm going to set this compressor now to sidechain mode so that we can kind of pump this pad, duck it against the kick drum rather. So if I zoom in on that so you can see, we're going to set this to side instead of regular. So like instead of regular mode, so now it knows that I'm trying to sidechain it. We're going to take the knee and we're going to change that from soft to hard. And what that means is how fast the compressor responds to the signals that we're sending into it. I want it to respond really fast, so we're setting this to a hard knee instead of a soft knee. I want it to also, duck the pad sound the very millisecond that kick drum hits. So we're going to take the attack of this compressor and bring that all the way down to 0. We're going to bring the release up a little bit. We maybe need to adjust that in a minute. And we're going to save again at this time. Okay, bringing down, no, I'll probably leave that there. Let's see here. Now I just need to trigger this pad to play. And so maybe, I'm not sure exactly how long the sample is or whatever, so maybe like every 8 bars we could trigger it or something like that. Probably it's at least 8 bars. So if I bring our third clock division here in the clocked module, if I bring that down to like -16, what that does is now it's equivalent, sends a pulse out or a gate signal every 8 bars. It will send out a pulse signal. That's a divided by 16 clock. So if I take that output and I route that into the play, that's the trigger input of our sample, every 8 bars, it will trigger that sample to play again from the beginning. And hopefully that will be enough to keep it sustained, which is what I'm looking for. So if I press play, it's not going to trigger it until the next time through. Is that it? Oh, it's playing it now. Okay. Awesome. Okay. I'm bringing the volume down on that new sound. Our pad, sustained pad. And now, we're not hearing any pumping at all yet, so we're going to make that happen. All I need to do is adjust the threshold, and we'll really start to bring it down. And not only will we hear the pumping start to take place, but we'll see the representation of it on the compressor itself as well. I did forget to actually put the input in. We need to tell the compressor that when the kick drum hits, every time it should duck the volume a little bit using the sidechain input. So I'm going to take the sidechain input here, and I'm going to take the kick drum, okay, and whoops, sidechain input, and I'm going to route that to the kick drum. So the kick drum is going directly into the compressor now, okay, and if I press play now over here on the big button, right? Okay. Let that pad start sustaining for us. Hang on for it. It's not triggered yet. Yeah, hot in LA, Dale. Whew. Brutal. It was like 111 here yesterday. Oh. Okay, so our sustained pad is playing here, but we're not hearing any pumping. I just need to bring the threshold down as much as we want to get. The more I bring it down, the more pumping we'll hear. So for example, if I'm going to mute our chord stabs, so all we're hearing now is our sustained pad. Okay, the more I bring the threshold down on that sustained pad, the more it pumps against the kick drum, the more it ducks every time the kick drum hits. So I can get maximum pumpage per se. You hear that pumping in and out? Right? So we can adjust that to taste using the threshold amount. Lower threshold, more pumping. We don't really want an extreme EDM pump. We just kind of want to duck the level back every time that kick drum hits. Okay, now if we zoom in on the compressor module, right here on this little VU meter, we can see the amount that it's ducking. Okay, we don't want a lot of ducking. We don't want like 24 decibels of ducking. That's a little extreme. Excuse me. But about 6 decibels of ducking sounds really nice. I think you'll agree. I'm going to go ahead and bring the volume down on this pad some more. Yeah, I have it just mono. Okay, so I don't need that. Okay, no worries. So I'm just tucking that pad back a little bit. Let's bring these chord stabs back in now. Bring the lows down on the chord stabs a little bit more. To give room in the low end frequency spectrum for the bass to exist. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and save at this time. And what we're gonna do, I still want to do a couple more things. I'd like to try to do a tiny little bit of sidechain compression on the chord stabs. What we're hearing, by the way, is when I press stop and it's still kind of playing out. That's I'm still pointing to it. That's our main sort of prolonged sample that's just playing to its end. When it gets to the end, it then stops. Save at this time. But what I want to do is I've got all of these things running into the chord stabs rather running into this mix 8 here, and I'd like to and then from the mix 8 they go into those individual filters where we're filtering the left and the right channel. What I'd like to do is I would like to do a little tiny bit of sidechain compression on the chords. So we're going to grab the compressor here that I've set up for sidechain, and we're going to duplicate that. We're going to put that right in front of these filters here, and we're going to take the left out from the chords and pads mixer. We're going to go to the left and right inputs of this compressor. We're going to take the left out into the left in onto the filter on the left, and take the right out to the input of our second filter there. It's still got all those same sidechain settings as the pad, but I don't want this to pump as much. I want it to be a lot more subtle. So I'm going to bring the threshold setting quite a bit up on that by default. The next thing I need to do is just assign the kick drum again into this sidechain input so it knows what to duck against. So I'm going to grab the sidechain here and I'm going to route that to the output of the kick drum again, so that whenever that kick drum hits, it triggers this compressor to do that tiny little bit of sidechain compression. But this time it's happening on everything going into this mixer, so our chord samples are kind of now ducking the tiniest little bit against our kick drum, keeping our kick drum really loud and prevalent. And the more things and the more layers we add, it doesn't start to bury the kick drum. Now, if you don't use any sidechain compression, what will often happen is, we're going to add a ride cymbal, maybe another layer of pads, whatever, and the kick drum can easily just sort of get muffled and buried down there where the other sounds are making it not very loud and not very clean and not very punchy. So we use these gentle sidechain compression techniques to really keep that kick nice and clean and just punching through everything. These are gentle effects. We're not doing extreme EDM pumping. All right, let's hear what this sounds like with a little bit of sidechain on the chords now. So lastly, I want to do the same thing with the bass, and I want to sidechain the bass against the kick drum. So I'm going to take this compressor that we've already got set up for sidechain. I'm going to just touch it and hit Control D to duplicate it, and I'm going to put it down here by the bass. All right. We're going to take the output of our bass EQ, our main bass there, and instead of routing that directly into the mixer, we're going to route it into this sidechain compressor, and then to the mixer. Now I just need to tell the mixer that what the sidechain input is. So I route the sidechain input to that kick output again. Now I can zoom in on this compressor, and I can see here on the visual how much it's ducking the signal. I want it to be very gentle. So I'm going to bring up the threshold so that it's just barely visually ducking that bass. Yeah. And let's see. We're now 3 hours into a session, and we've got, it's not the best dub techno groove in the history of ever, but I think you'll agree that this sounds pretty much like dub techno. And we've created this 100% completely from scratch. We are using a kick drum sample, from one of my sample packs, and that hi-hat is a hi-hat sample, but the stabs and all these textures we created from scratch, and that bass line we programmed. Now, I said earlier how we were going to get the bass line to play some notes and not just the one same note over and over again. We can do that really easily now. We've got a groove put together by just adjusting this attenuverter that we have our noise running into that is generating the potential notes to create our bass line. Currently, the attenuverter that we're running the noise into is set to 0, so it's not letting any range of notes come through. But if I mute our second mixer with all the melodic information on it so we can just hear the bass and the drums, all right, we can hear that the bass line is just playing one note. But if I move this offset a little, no, not the offset, but the attenuverter, is it here? Yeah, I'm doing something wrong because we're not getting the range of notes here per se. I think I just need to switch the order in which this is happening. So let's try that. Noise to the in. It's a long session. I'm a little frazzled. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Out to the out, into the. Whoops, that should be zeroed out, but this should be. And I think I'm not quite doing that right, but that's okay. We don't need to just go on forever and ever today. What I did want to do was to get a groove actually going all the way from scratch, and I think we've accomplished that pretty well. I think I'm just going to leave that bass line the way it was then. I'm doing something wrong over there. I can't quite see what it is. It's in the routing somewhere. But nonetheless, that's not bad. Okay, let's see here. All right. Let's add a ride cymbal, and then we're going to call it today. I'm going to bring in one, just copy one of these trigger sequencers, right? Duplicate one of these blanks as well to separate this out. Yeah, give this a clock and a reset, right? And I just want to make this like a, oh, I don't know, like a 16, yeah, cool. Just gonna put in some eighth notes here. I'm gonna grab a sampler now, tags, sampler, and here we go. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna route the gate into the play of the sampler, and I'm gonna load a ride cymbal into this sampler. Let's go to my sample pack folder. Let's go to the lo-fi dub pack for the Digitact. I have some rides here. Let's grab one of them. How about this one? Cool. And we can see that it's already just, you know, triggering that ride on the eighth note. Ding, 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 ding. Cool. I want an EQ for this ride, so let's grab an EQ. Tags. Equalizer. Bring in a mono equalizer. Take an output to the input of that. And now I want to route this to our very first mixer, the mixer that's not going to any sidechain compression. Now it's playing a bass now and not a ride, but we remember that all I need to do is just scroll through the sample here to play any sample in this folder. Ooh, how about that one? That sounds great. Alright. Bring the level on this down. Maybe mess with the pitch of that sample just a little bit. Ooh, even better. All right. sounds really nice, but let's do one last thing today before we call it. And that is, there's so much evolution on all of these things that we've got created. So let's make sure that we have a little bit of evolution on literally everything we're creating. And let's put some evolution happening on this ride sample. So a couple of ways we could approach this. We could maybe do some automation on the tuning of the sound, so that moves. But something that might be fun would be to put another filter on that sound. I really like to use a lot of filters in my production. We're going to grab this VCF here from Bog Audio, and I'm going to set this to the lowest, most gentle setting that it can be on, which is just a one-pole filter. I'm going to take the output from our original EQ and route that into this filter instead. And now if I press play, we can hear the little bit of filtering that I'm doing on this ride cymbal. See, I can listen for specifically for the ride cymbal. It's gone now, right? I filtered it out. And I can bring it back. But it's very gently because I'm filtering it out with just a one-pole filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one of our existing LFOs, a nice slow LFO from this DivKid Oct module, and I'm going to route that into the CV input of the filter that our ride is going into. Then we're just going to use the attenuverter that's built into this filter and tell it how much we want the knob to move. And I'm going to make the knob move to the left and filter the cymbal down. And now we just sort of listen for how much it filters it and whether we like that. It's going to be a nice slow evolution. Maybe too slow, so I'll make it into a faster slot of the DivKid Oct module. Goes. Now it literally faded it all the way out. I don't want it to go quite that far, so I'm going to adjust the amount of modulation happening. It's coming back now. If we want it to come in and out slower or faster, I can kind of adjust, which output of this LFO is, adjusting our filter. Don't want it to go quite as far out. Almost there. Maybe bring the kick drum down a tiny little bit in the mix. It's hard to get a decent mix on, headphones on a live stream. I hope it sounds okay today. I'm not sure if the chords are loud enough or too loud, but I think we've done what I've set out to achieve today, and that is to create a complete, not complete per se, but a complete groove, not a complete patch. I would do a lot more to this before I would call it like a complete patch. But we've definitely got some evolution happening. At this point, what I would probably do if I was to keep going is I would do things like maybe automate the hi-hat to turn on and off every 16 bars. Maybe automate our sustained pumping pad to sort of like fade all the way out every so many bars, and then just add more sounds that sort of come in and out using different techniques and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely, I think this went pretty well today. We created that pad texture example from scratch this morning, and then sampled it, recorded it out, loaded it into 4 different samplers, adjusted how we're playing that, do extra stereo filtering on the sound to get a little bit of variation in the stereo field as well. We set up these complicated, mixer setups, so anything we're running into specific mixers that's automatically getting sidechained against the kick drum. We sidechained the bass against the kick drum, so the kick drum is really clean and punching through. We sidechained our pad and our chords against that kick drum as well. All right, good patch today. This was a fun session. I really appreciate, everyone who's been hanging out for this session. I'm going to give you guys time to say goodbye to each other in the chat and also to ask any last minute questions if there are any. And then I think we're going to wrap it up for today. All right. Hey, I appreciate that. Thanks, Dale. Yeah, let's see here. Douglas is having a little bit of problem with getting the chord pad to turn into a stab without actually recording it out. And there's probably a really easy way that I can show how to do that. So what let's do before we call it real fast is let me just open up the pad that we started with, okay, which is that big sustained pad. And let me delete this recording device, right? And so we're not worrying about recording this. Let's say we just want to turn this into a stab, right? I'm going to unplug it from the output of our limiter and the actual like audio. And what let's do now is let's add a VCA in this. This is a stereo signal. So I'm going to reset these filters and I'm going to go down to find a voltage controlled amplifier. I don't know if I have a stereo one or not. It doesn't look like we do, but we can grab yeah, this will work awesome. We can just grab this. Will work perfectly for a stereo one. This is just a default VCA from Bog Audio, right? What we can do is we can take the outputs from our limiter into the input, the left into the top input, and the right into the bottom input. And this actually, using envelopes, is one of the most complicated things that I was able to understand. I used to have to actually sketch this concept out and like write it down. And then when I wanted to use envelopes, I would have to refer to my little cheat sheet to get this concept down. It's not super easy, but we're routing the audio in here now. And now we just need an envelope shape to trigger this VCA to open and close. So we're going to right click, we're going to reset these filters, and we're going to go to envelope generator. Any of these would work, but I really like this default one from the built into VCV Rack because you can see the shape of it. And that's really handy. So we're going to put that next to it here. I'm going to bring the attack down, maybe just bring this to a little bit more of a plucked kind of a setting, right? Then I'm going to take the envelope out of this and I'm going to run it to the CV input of this VCA so that whenever this triggers, this shape here is going to open up the volume in the shape of this ADSR. So all we need now is a way to trigger this ADSR. And what I was using in the other patch was a clocked module and then running the clock into a sequencer and using the sequencer to trigger this, okay? But you can actually do it any number of ways. You just need to send any type of signal in there at all. So if I take this big button and I take this output and I use the output there to trigger this gate input, now every time I hit this, it's triggering this signal. So if I take the output of the VCA now and I route the left output into the left input of our audio output module and then the right output into the right input, whenever I trigger this VCA, again, this could be a sequencer or even an LFO. It could be any number of things. All you need is just a trigger. In fact, look, we don't even need to actually have a manual module. There's a push button right here. When I push this button, it's going to actually do it. So you can hear, bring the volume up here. And then I'll bring that volume way up, sorry. And then maybe the release up. Got a really low level here. So I could fix that by, just resetting the filters, bringing in a limiter or something, and then, putting this, go out into the in of this limiter, right? And then out from the limiter into the output module, put that back to normal kind of thing, right? And then maybe just bring up this gain a lot. Bring that up again now. I just have the mixer levels like not quite set right for the stream, but you get the drift. Hopefully what I'm trying to show here is that any way you trigger this envelope, that's opening and closing this VCA. So if I want the stab to be a longer stab, I can just change the envelope shape, make a longer release time, and now it's a long stab. If I want the stab to fade in, I can just bring up the envelope of the attack envelope. And now if I want it to fade in a lot, for example, I can bring that way up. And now the sound is really just kind of fades in. So yeah, so you just need an envelope generator and a VCA, and then any way to trigger this envelope generator. You can use, like I said, like I was using earlier, those sequencers that have triggers out. You could even put an LFO here and, you know, trigger this in weird ways if you wanted to get strange results. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, like we could even put the recorder in here, shape the stab how we wanted, and then, you know, record the stabs with the shape. There's a short stab. There's a long stab. There's a really short stab, you know, if we were recording those that way. I hope that makes sense. All right. Wow, what a long stream. 3 hours and 15 minutes today. I really appreciate everyone hanging out in the chat. It's been a really fun one. Somebody says, I need a bigger PC monitor and a trackball mouse. Yeah, I hear that. I'm really doing so much of the zooming in, you know, for sure. All right. All right, everyone. So yeah, if you're enjoying my content, if you enjoyed the stream, drop a like on this real quick. It helps feed the YouTube algorithm, you know, to help share my content to more people. All right, this was a blast. I think we'll definitely be doing more VCV Rack streams in the future. If you guys are into that, let me know in the comments. And also let me know by hitting that thumbs up. Right on. Okay, cool deal. So we're going to go ahead and call it, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. And until next time, take care of each other, everyone. All right. Thanks for hanging out. All right, what are we pressing here? All right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.